Moonless Skies Touch. Prologue. It is said that only the strongest know what pain is. They know because that's what drives them to become strong. So then, after all the pain that Ichigo had experienced, why couldn't he be strong enough? This lone thought occupied Kurosaki Ichigo's mind as he watched Aizen's struggling form after he experienced said substitute Shinigami's Mugetsu technique. Seeing that the madman was still trying to get up, he shunpoed next to him and watched if he would be back to fighting, an idea that horrified him. After a few seconds though, the brown-haired transcender's arms gave out under him, and he fell back, eyes lifeless, and our hero sighed in relief. Finally, he had defeated Aizen. He sacrificed his powers, and with them his partners, his Hollow and his Zanpakuto, to end the Winter War. After much spilled blood and many fallen warriors, it was over. He could finally rest easily. Perhaps he could go check on his friends. Ichigo's now red eyes widened in shock as he realized what he was thinking about. He couldn't check on his friends. No, he couldn't, because they were dead. This brought him back to the main question of his life. What was he supposed to do now? He failed to protect Anao, who was killed by the two female Arrancar while he was fighting Ulquera, which made him go insane with sorrow and turn hollow. Renji and Ishida also got killed by Shale Aporo in their fight, because the captains arrived too late. Eventually, Chad also died, because Anohana-sen got there too late and couldn't do anything to save him. Most of the captains in the living world, including Sui Feng, Toshiro, Yukitake-san and Gramps, also died during their fights. He cringed when he remembered the sight of a lone, injured Kairaku-sen left to pick up the remains of Gotti 13. Many of the Vizards also got either injured or killed, dragging down with them many of the Arrancar. His old man and Yoruichi-san died trying to stall Aizen, and Urahara-san was forced to pass on the secret of the final Getsuga Tensho to Ichigo in Isshin's place. His human friends were already dead by the time he reached the real Karakura town. He was forced to watch his sister's lifeless, shocked expression, eyes wide open, as he still had to defeat Aizen. In the end, no matter how human Ichigo could be, he couldn't forgive Aizen for what he did to his loved ones. If only Rukia could see him right now. She'd certainly beat him up for sulking. If only she were alive. Thinking about her, he raised his head to stare at the sky. The dark clouds were glaring at him, as if blaming him for so many people's deaths. Dark clouds reminded him of her icy blade, how she wielded her pure-sewed no Shiryuki with so much grace that she looked like she was dancing. Rukia. His knees gave up and he collapsed on them, still staring at the sky. Soon, little drops of rain fell on his face. Those drops turned in a full-blown rain, soaking his long, black hair and gray bandages. He smiled bitterly when he realized that probably the sky was crying for his loss. Unable to contain it any longer, Ichigo clenched his teeth as he lowered his head, and hot tears rolled down his cheeks. Why did they have to die? Why was I so weak? Why? He murmured to himself. His hands clenched into fists so hard that his nails dug into his skin and drew blood. Shakily, he tilted his head back, and he gave out a pained roar. Why? His mind was numb, his skin cold. He sat there and cried it all out, not realizing that he had yet to lose his powers, neither that a bright light was heading towards him. Suddenly, he was brought back to reality when he felt something warm touch his cheek. His eyes snapped open. There stood a woman, dressed in a long, white robe, with long, golden hair flowing out behind her. Seeing his shocked expression, she simply smiled sadly. I think that you've suffered long enough, my child. You deserve so much more than this. What do you wish for? She said gently. As surprised as he was, Ichigo found himself pondering his answer. Finally, he answered, I wish for a chance to go back and stop this war. His eyes stared at the woman, burning with determination. She smiled proudly. So it shall be done. And that was the last thing he remembered, before darkness engulfed him. Moonless Skies Touch. First Arc: The Arrival. Chapter 1, Building the Path. Numb. Why was everything so numb? Aizen. He defeated Aizen. Friends, old man, Yusu, Karen, all dead. The war had ended. It rained, and he cried. Then, what? His head was throbbing as he was trying to recall what had happened and help himself come back to reality. There was this woman, wait. Suddenly, his eyes split wide open, and he found himself lying on the grassy ground of a park. He was back in Karakura town. What the hell? He uttered confusedly. Last time he checked he was outside Karakura, and there was this blonde lady. She had this strange, but kind aura about her that gave him no room for resistance. He told her he wished to go back in time, but she couldn't have fulfilled his wish, could she? As a matter of fact, she did, a young, male voice said clearly in his head. Ichigo's eyes widened again. Z Zangetsu, Ichigo thought in shock. He thought he felt his Zanpakuto smiling, but waved it off. Tensa Zangetsu. But nevertheless, yes, Tensa replied amusedly. Oi, ya shitty king, don't you dare forget 'bout me, his hollow yelled in annoyance. Ichigo's eyebrow twitched. Can't really say I missed you too much, hollow, he replied half-heartedly. The hollow mock gasped. How dare ya? After all we've done for ya, you can't even admit you missed my heart-warming presence. Traitor. Ichigo chose to ignore him this time. Z Tensa, I'm sorry for having to use that technique. I'm sorry I chose to abandon you too, but I couldn't bring myself to risk anyone's life anymore. In the end, I couldn't save anyone, he explained bitterly. The Zanpakuto scowled. There's no use brooding over the past. Right now, it seems as if we were given a second chance, he said calmly. With this, the Shinigami was brought back to reality. About that, who the hell was that woman? To be able to keep my powers, he mumbled in confusion. Does that even matter? What matters is that we're freaking back and you're still a freaking Shinigami, which means she could have made your wish come true. And that means that we might have gone back in time, the hollow said. Tensa Zangetsu nodded. He's right, Ichigo. We should check if we have really time traveled. Ichigo agreed. He stood there a few seconds, trying to figure out in which part of the Karakura he was. Then he shunpoed his way towards the Urahara Shoten. It was night, so he could easily travel over buildings without worrying that someone with spiritual pressure might notice him. In no more than 2 minutes, he traveled half the city and reached his destination. Taking a deep breath and mentally praying, he prepared to knock on the double door, when he suddenly felt a high spiritual pressure appear. Glancing back at the Urahara Shoten, he shook his head and headed for the source of the spiritual pressure. It seemed familiar, but since he always sucked at sensing Ryatsu, he couldn't figure out who it was. Soon, he landed in a tree near a dimly lit street. Wait, this is where I... Don't move. Ichigo's eyes widened. He turned to look at the owner of the voice. Rukia, he whispered brokenly. She's alive. She's really alive. There stood Rukia, dressed in his sister's dress, eyes full of tears, halfway turning to look at himself. What the fuck, Ichigo thought as he stared, jaw slack. It truly was him, lying on the ground, garbed in Shinigami outfit, with a mop of orange hair on the top of his head. He shivered involuntarily. It felt really weird to see himself, without looking in a mirror. Figures, we've only been sent here. Doesn't really mean we're part of this realm, Tensa muttered. Also, there was Byakuya and Renji. This was just before Rukia was taken back to the Soul Society. Maybe I can stop them from taking her. But how do I do that without shocking pretty much everyone? I mean, it must be weird to see a clone of someone suddenly appear next to said someone, he rambled. In case you haven't noticed, you're still in Getsuga form, so that might just work out for you, his hollow helped. True to the fact, when Ichigo glanced at himself, he saw the gray bandages and tattered, flaring black pants. While he could stay and ponder over why he hadn't lost his powers and gone back to being orange-haired, he decided that he could figure that out later. So, having made up his mind, Ichigo shunpoed towards the unaware Shinagamis. Byakuya was just about to tell Renji to open the Senkamen when he suddenly felt a new presence appear behind him. Turning around, he noticed a strange male, with long, black hair, red eyes and dressed in gray bandages and ripped hakama. "Who are you? And why are you here?" he asked unflinchingly. Next to him, Rukia stared at the intruder in shock and with traces of fear. This stranger didn't seem to have any spiritual pressure, so why was he here, staring at them? The stranger stared at Byakuya for a second, glanced at Rukia, and then turned back to Byakuya. "I am Mugetsu. Why I am here does not matter. What matters is finding out how I managed to outdo you and how to get Rukia back," the black-haired man said, his strong, masculine voice sounding clearly despite his face being covered. That being said, Mugetsu suddenly disappeared, quickly grabbing Rukia by the waist, then throwing Ichigo over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes and headed for the Urahara Shoten. Rukia blinked as she took in her surroundings. She was at the Urahara Shoten. How the hell did they get here so fast? Mugetsu put Rukia down, but still didn't let go of her shoulder. "I know you have many questions, but just, if I let go of you, don't run away. I can help you," he whispered. She was still suspicious of him and shocked that they managed to escape her Nyai-sama, but decided to trust his words, for now, so she nodded. The man let go of her shoulder and banged his hand on the Shoten's double door, only to hit a shocked Urahara Kisuke's forehead. Mugetsu quickly drew his hand back. "Sorry about that. Now, instead of having to go find Ichigo on your own, I brought him to you, so mind letting us in? We're kinda in a hurry." Kisuke took one more moment to stare in shock at Mugetsu, then at Rukia, then at the bloodied Ichigo. Deciding that they had time for discussions later, he let the three in, then quickly closed the doors and locked them. "Tessai," the shopkeeper called. He glanced at the black-haired man. "Please hand Kurosaki-san to my assistant and follow me." Mugetsu nodded, handing his past self over to the Kaido expert, then following Urahara towards his meeting room. Seating themselves at the table, Mugetsu prepared himself for any questions that would be thrown at him. He decided that, since these were two of his closest friends, namely his mentor and his best friend, he couldn't really lie to them, so he would answer anything that they would ask him, without adding information that wasn't requested, so that he wouldn't change the timeline too much. With a mental sigh, he realized that it was already pretty much messed up because of his saving Rukia. "Who are you?" Rukia asked. Mugetsu mentally smirked. "Pretty blunt." "As I have already told your older brother, I am Mugetsu," he replied smoothly. Rukia didn't seem to like his answer, as her eye twitched. Urahara decided to take over. She asked for your real name. "My real name isn't going to help you in any way, and I don't have the expenses to reveal it to you, but I will tell you, one day, after this whole Aizen shit is over," the black-haired male said bitterly. Rukia's eyes widened. "Are you talking about Aizen Sasuke? The Teichu of the 5th Division? What does he have to do with all this?" she said, staring in shock. Mugetsu sighed. "Might as well tell you the entire story. Look, Rukia, Aizen is not who he seems to be. He was going to betray the Soul Society after he took out an important tool that was placed inside your soul. The Hogyoku," he explained. In less than a second, Kisuke was pointing the tip of Benayem, who was in Shikai, at the stranger's neck. "How do you know about the Hogyoku?" he asked harshly. Mugetsu stared at him, unblinking. Then, he pushed the blade away with one finger. "Do not threaten me, Urahara-san. I am on your side, rest assured," he said. Urahara stood there, staring at this alien with newfound awe. Suddenly, the alien continued. "Please remove the Hogyoku from Rukia's soul. I am going to dispose of Aizen before he finds out that she no longer holds it," said alien continued. Sighing, Urahara sheathed his Zanpakuto and sat back. He raised a hand to rub his nose bridge in distress. "You save these two, and then you reveal that you know quite a deal about our situation. including classified information, and then you push aside my blade like it was made of feathers. I don't know whether to trust you or to grab Kuchiki-san here and run for it, he said wearily. Urahara was a great strategist. Almost everyone who has heard of him knew. So for him to get lost on what to do was catastrophic. Mugetsu gave a small smile, though they couldn't see it through the bandages. Urahara-san, I am willing to put my head on a silver plate. If that's what's necessary for you to accept my help. I wish I could tell you more about myself, but there are certain circumstances that do not allow me to do so. When I will be able to, though, I will tell you. But for the moment, I only ask that you listen to my advice, because if you do not, I am afraid that the people involved will have to suffer for our mistakes, he explained, bowing his head after doing so. Will you? Rukia, who for a while now had been shocked into silence, bit her lip to contain her horror and spoke. You have my trust, Mugetsu. I don't know if this is foolish, but for now I choose to trust you, she said tiredly. Urahara glanced at her and sighed. Again. I will trust you. Don't make me regret my decision, he demanded. Mugetsu nodded. All right then, since Rukia has not been taken to the Soul Society, she will not reach Sakayoku Hill to be executed, and Aizen will not have the chance to grab the Hogyoku and retreat to Hukomundo. Train Ichigo, and when he is ready, we will leave for the Soul Society and I will take down Aizen myself. However, I want you to take the Hogyoku out of Rukia, since it is only bringing trouble to her person. I will help you find a way to get rid of it once and for all, he explained his plan to the ex-captain. Even if mildly surprised at the information, the man knew. Kisuke nodded. I suppose it could work. But how are you so sure you will be able to defeat him? He asked. The black-haired male scowled. I already did it once. I can do it one more time. At this, the shopkeeper's eyebrows shot up to his hairline. Rukia stared blankly at the table for a few seconds, then looked at Mugetsu. Something's bothering me, she said simply. Mugetsu stared at her, waiting for her question. Why is Aizen doing all this? I mean, he seems really powerful already, much more so than the captains, so then why go to such lengths to achieve this item? Urahara's expression turned somber, and the stranger's brows furrowed. Finally, said stranger spoke up. Hogyoku is a tool that can grant one's heart's desires. It can create, morph, improve, and fool. Aizen believes that the Serite and its rulers, the royal family, have a corrupt way of ruling the afterlife. So he wishes to kill the Spirit King and practically become God, he explained. The petite Shinigami's eyes widened. Kisuke shook his head. Madman, I'm glad I faced reality and abandoned such thoughts, he muttered. Mugetsu chuckled. Me too. I wouldn't be able to defeat him if you wouldn't have done so. And once again, Urahara found himself perplexed. As he brushed off any more thoughts about this man's past, the ex-captain looked at Mugetsu. It's been a long night. I suggest getting a bit of sleep. Tomorrow I plan to take out the Hogyoku and maybe start Kurosaki-san's training. Do you have a place to spend the night at, Mugetsu-san? Said man shook his head. All right, follow me to your room. Finishing their conference, they stood and Kisuke guided them through his residence. Rukia sighed as she walked back to her room after having changed in a white yukata. Today has been a very stressing day, she thought. First off, I almost got arrested by Niai-sama and Renji. Ichigo got critically injured, Mugetsu saved our asses. And then there was the recent discussion. Sighing, she put away those frustrating thoughts and decided to have a nice rest. When she entered the room, she was surprised to find Mugetsu dressed in a similar white yukata, taking off his bandages. Her eyes widened and she stopped in her tracks. He did not seem to notice her as he slowly unwrapped his mask, revealing a masculine, well-defined face structure with high cheekbones and a sharp chin. His long, unruly black hair had been tied in a low ponytail, so she could now clearly see the broadness of his shoulders. After a few seconds, though, he reached the neck where the bandage that had been previously covering his chest continued. Putting the bandages away, He finally noticed her staring at him. He smirked boyishly in amusement. To say that she was surprised to see his well-sculpted face was an understatement. She was practically gaping at him, surprised to see such familiarity in his features, and surprised to find herself charmed by same features. Blushing, she turned to look another way. Any way would have been as long as she did not meet his eyes. Like what you see, he teased. Though, mentally he was scolding himself for saying that, yelling at his hollow's perversity. With newfound confidence, she stared at him and stuck her tongue. Maybe. Though you look very much like Ichigo. At this, Mugetsu was inwardly starting to panic. Except he doesn't have that sharp, mature look. He's still a big baby. Too bad. He would have had popularity with girls if he did. He mentally sighed. After realizing the implications of her words, though, his cheeks gained a rosy tint and he raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting something? He asked. Maybe, she escaped again. Chuckling, he sat on his futon, buried himself under sheets, then turned to her. God, I missed you so much, he muttered, his lips stretching in a sad smile. Did you say something? She asked, feigning not hearing what he said. When he shook his head and turned to face the window, she frowned in concern. I know he has a complicated past behind him, but how could he have known me? That distant expression. I feel sorry for him, though I don't know why. Sighing a little, she closed her eyes. I guess we will find out soon enough. Moonless Skies Touch. First Arc The Arrival. Chapter 2 Class in Session. Mugetsu shot up in his bed and rubbed his sore ears. Chuckling, he stood and headed for the source of the not-so-manly scream. On the way there, he encountered the dirty blonde shopkeeper. He's awake, isn't he? The black-haired male asked. Urahara just nodded and grinned deviously. Expression turning serious, Mugetsu glanced at the door leading to Ichigo's room. Begin his training as fast as you can. I'll know when to step in. Kisuke stared for a moment at the other man, as if trying to figure something out. Eyes widening a bit, he turned and headed for said room. You're one mysterious fellow, aren't you, Kurosaki Ichigo? I guess you may have one good reason for doing this. Rukia was eating her breakfast, thinking about the previous day and preparing herself for today's events. Hogyoku? I don't even know what it looks like, yet it is inside me. Are we really just pawns in a bigger game? Me, Renji, Niai-sama. Suddenly, she was brought out of her musings when a long, slender finger hit her forehead. She jumped and raised her hands to cover said spot, eyes widening comically. There stood Mugetsu, on the opposite side of the table, finger still raised in the position it ended up after he poked her. What the hell, you fool? Rukia exclaimed, rubbing the sore spot. Mugetsu shrugged. You were moping. Had this big ugly frown on your face, he explained, uncaringly. Her eye twitched and jumped, preparing to kick him. Unfortunately, he dodged and she ended up on the floor, spluttering. As he laughed at her predicament, she scowled and elbowed him. Hard. Oh, what the hell, insane midget, he exclaimed as she had done before. You poked me, and you dodged, she reasoned. Mugetsu's eyebrows twitched comically. And I should have let you beat me up? For what? A light poke? You must be deranged, he complained. She opened her mouth to retort, but ended up closing it, remembering her current predicament. Seeing this, the man's eyes softened. Don't worry, you won't feel a thing, he said. Rukia shook her head. That's not what I'm worried about. I mean, there's this big affair going on, and the Gotti 13 had no idea about it. Hell, I didn't know I was a host for the most desired tool in the afterlife, she said, eyebrow furrowing. Mugetsu scowled. Well, I know for a fact that Aizen planned my entire existence in this affair, except me killing him. So, yeah, you're not alone in all this. But at least it's going to be over in a few weeks. Then we can go on about our lives, he explained. The petite Shinigami's eyes widened. Aizen planned his entire existence, and I thought I was a victim. He must have felt broken at finding out. Seeing Rukia's sympathetic look, he shook his head. Don't look at me like that. As I already said, it will soon be over, so my situation doesn't really matter all that anymore. He closed his eyes and crossed his arms, as if in deep thought. After a few seconds, he stood. Come. Let's see if we can get that little bastard out, he said, and motioned for her to follow him. Rukia bit her lip. The memories of a harsh childhood overwhelmed her, a pain in the stomach present. If my childhood was harsh, how was his? Such pained eyes. Putting depressing thoughts aside, she followed him, bracing herself for the next challenge. Zangetsu. After the dust had settled, Urahara was able to study the boy's large Zanpakuto. It seemed like he managed to impress him once again. Since you gained your Zanpakuto, we can now Biji, Urahara began. Unfortunately, he was cut off by the appearance of the black-haired man, Mugetsu. May I step in? The man asked. Ichigo stared at him suspiciously. This was the man who saved him on the night Byakuya and Renji came. He was still covered in the same gray bandages and black hakama. Urahara retreated, and Mugetsu turned to face him. What are you doing? Ichigo asked confusedly. Mugetsu raised an eyebrow. From now on, I'm training you. But first, we need to have a little chat. It was Ichigo's turn to raise his eyebrows. About? About what you're training for, he replied. Rukia escaped arrest and certain execution. What are you going to do once we finish your training? I don't know, he answered truthfully. He really had no idea what he was doing. Rukia didn't need to be rescued, so then, why was he training? Let me tell you a few things. There's a reason Rukia should have been in Soul Society now, and not really for execution. Aizen Sasuke, a captain of the Goti 13, had planned for a century her meeting with you, Mugetsu said. Ichigo's eyes widened and his jaw went slack. 100 years ago, as a captain, Urahara Kisuke had created the Hogyoku, which grants the one it finds worthy their most intimate desires. Aizen wanted to use it to become God, so Urahara hid it in the soul of a baby. In Rukia's soul, he continued. He had been planning your existence, planned you meeting her, planned her giving you Shinigami powers, so that she would have to be executed, planned you going to rescue her, so that after you destroyed the object of her execution and the captains were distracted, he could take the Hogyoku out of her soul. He even planned for you and Mother to die, Mugetsu explained. At this, Ichigo was horrified. He was no longer able to think straight. Mom? So he... Mugetsu nodded. He was the one who sent Grand Fisher to the living world, precisely, Karakura town. He knew the Hollow would be attracted to your mother's high Ryatsu, as well as yours. The young Shinigami stared blankly at the ground. It was all my fault. Ichigo was on the verge of starting an entire speech about how he was at fault. However, he was cut off by a flying punch. When he hit the ground, he stood weakly and rubbed his sore cheek, staring shocked at his assailant. Mugetsu glared at him. It wasn't your damn fault. Stop blaming yourself. It was Aizen's. He sent Grand Fisher to kill your mother. He convinced Yukatake to send Rukia to the living world so that you two could meet, and he was the one who aided Abare Renji with high-tech tools, so that he could successfully capture Rukia. He planned your entire existence. At this point, the young Kurosaki didn't know what to think of the entire situation. He had a feeling that this stranger wasn't lying, and because of that, he ended up choking on whatever words he planned to pass. What am I supposed to do now? Ichigo said, coiling and grabbing his head. The black-haired male grimaced. It hurt to see himself in agony, but this was necessary. There is only one thing you can do. Fight, Mugetsu said. Ichigo raised his head slightly to look at him. Fight, grow stronger, protect. Isn't that what your name means? The name your mother gave you? One who protects, right? Aizen isn't dead yet. I'm going to kill him, but I need your help to infiltrate the Soul Society. What do you say? Will you help me end this madman's plans? Such strong eyes. This man, who is he? Ichigo thought. staring at the stranger amazed. Though he'd never admit it, he was absently accepting the fact that he could learn a lot from him. He knew way too much about him. But then again, Urahara was a pretty mysterious fellow too, so he brushed it off, for the moment. Ichigo stood and clenched his fists, eyes burning with determination. Train me, Mugetsu. We'll end this Aizen once and for all. Behind his mask, Mugetsu smirked. It seemed like Jin had rubbed off on him. Those were the kind of eyes his younger self had to have. Strong, fiery, determined eyes. Grab your partner, Ichigo. Keep aware. Don't relax, don't underestimate. I'm not as forgiving as Urahara. Tolerance is the last thing you need if you want to get strong, the wild transcender declared. Here I come, he whispered, and he disappeared. Ichigo's eyes widened. Where could he have disappeared to? Suddenly, there was a slight breeze brushing past his shoulder, and he felt himself pinned down by a strong force. He felt air leave his lungs as Mugetsu's foot crushed his chest. Said attacker scoffed. Chi, you are lucky I chose to just pin you down. If I intended to kill you, you'd be dead before you had any time to register it. The young Shinigami swallowed heavily. Mugetsu scowled and continued. This just shows that you aren't even near good enough for Soul Society. It also shows that you did not take my warning to heart. I will not hesitate to take your life the next time you aren't paying enough attention. Shunpoing away from Ichigo, Mugetsu stood there, arms crossed, watching as the Shinigami got up slowly. After he regained his composure, the black-haired male attacked him again. This time, Ichigo dodged the older man's fist. He watched as a small crater formed in the place the punch landed. Mugetsu, however, spared no time and quickly weighed himself on his hands and kicked the orange-haired Shinigami in the ribs, sending him flying in a boulder. Jumping back on his feet, he watched as the dust settled and the Shinigami slowly got up from the pile of rubble, coated in light scratches. Damn, you kick harder than Rukia, Ichigo joked. Mugetsu chuckled. Tell that to her face, he replied. Unfortunately for the younger male, the black-haired transcender disappeared again. As soon as he reappeared, Ichigo ducked a fist aimed to his head and stepped back to dodge another. However, he soon found himself cornered, having reached the boulder with his back, and Mugetsu launched a high kick, landing just beside Ichigo's head, cracking the boulder until it was completely destroyed. The Shinigami's eyes widened. Mugetsu got back in a relaxed stance. Only dodging isn't going to help you win. It keeps you alive, yes, but at one point, you will not be able to dodge anymore. Fight back, he lectured. Ichigo nodded, and Mugetsu shunpoed a few feet away, then charged again. When he launched a side kick, Ichigo blocked it with a temporarily forgotten Zangetsu's blunt side. Mugetsu smirked when he shunpoed away in order to dodge a slash from said Zanpakuto. Charging once again, he jumped in the air, and by the time he was 10 feet above the Shinigami, he brought down his right foot in a Ryatsu-charged kick. Not fast enough to register, Ichigo brought up his left arm to block. Mugetsu grinned. Wrong move, he said, as Ichigo found himself overwhelmed by the strength of the kick and struggled to block it, creating a crater beneath his feet. Soon, though, his arm gave up and he jumped back to avoid the landing. Turning to look at his arm, he found it slightly burned, a black, bleeding mark visible where the foot landed. Biting his lip, he scowled and turned to look at Mugetsu. Is this the power of a captain? Mugetsu stared at him for a second. Yes, this is the power of a captain in Shikai. Ichigo's eyes widened. Only Shikai. So then, does that mean that this man is at his limit? If he doesn't use the power equal to Bankai, does he even have a Zanpakuto? I cannot tell, Ichigo. His Ryatsu is suppressed to the point one would state he is dead, so I do not know if he has a partner or not. However, judging by how he wants us to work together, I would say he has. The wise voice of Zangetsu sounded in his head. Zangetsu, you can talk to me while I'm not in my inner world? Ichigo asked in shock. By the feeling of it, the Zanpakuto must have scowled. Of course. Nonetheless, his appearance is familiar, he muttered. Shrugging of the shiver that run down his spine, Ichigo grabbed Zangetsu with both hands and charged. Mugetsu raised an eyebrow. Finally, he seems to be getting the idea, he thought. When Ichigo brought down his sword and he was finally thinking that he got him, Mugetsu simply stood there, not making a move to dodge. As soon as the blade made contact with his skin, Ichigo froze, unable to move or think when he found that there was no blood leaking. There is no blood because you are not aiming to kill. Because there's no power in your blade. You couldn't even cut my hair with this kind of attack, Mugetsu said. I am aiming to kill you. Find resolve to try and kill me too. Pushing back the frozen Shinigami a few feet, he built up a bit of Ryatsu so that it would leak out. It enveloped him in a black, heavy aura as he took a stance. His red eyes glinted blue as he stared determined at his past self. Your fear is what's stopping you from advancing. You fear that you might kill me, you fear that you might get killed, and you fear that those you protect might get killed as well. When you dodge, think I won't let them cut me. When you protect them, I won't let them die. If you attack, I will kill them. Now show me, Ichigo. Show me your resolve, he declared, quoting his mentor's words. He watched as his past self's eyes turned blue as he dodged his attacks. At one point, he blocked his arm with his blade, and a small cut appeared there. Mugetsu smirked and jumped in the air, disappearing. A few moments later, he was bringing down another kick upon Ichigo, leaving black flame like Ryatsu as a trail. He watched as Ichigo brought up his sword, bluish Ryatsu engulfing him. Getsuga Tenshu, he yelled, and released the familiar blue arc of energy. The arc engulfed Mugetsu as he tried to block it with simply his arms. A few moments later, the Ryatsu had risen to show Mugetsu, the bandages on his chest a bit ripped off. He was holding a rise-he-made sword in his right hand. Ichigo grinned. Finally, he said, as he collapsed and fell asleep. The other male chuckled. Maybe Urahara was right when he said, I'm a freaky kid, he said, smirking. Moonless Skies Touch. First Arc The Arrival. Chapter 3 The Calm Before the Storm. We're done, Mugetsu announced, and Ichigo fell to his knees, panting. Use these last 2 days to rest and spend time with your family. Urahara will announce you of when exactly to leave your house. Ichigo nodded, taking a deep breath and re-entering his body. Just before climbing the stairs to the Shoten, he turned his head halfway to glance at the older man. Thank you. At first, I was really wary of you, but you proved your intentions and helped me a lot, he said sincerely. Mugetsu smiled. Glad I could help. And soon, the boy disappeared up into the Shoten. Finally alone, he sat on the dusty ground and closed his eyes to gather his thoughts. Okay, let's recap up until now. My friends and family died. I killed Aizen. I succumbed to despair. Suddenly, this lady appears out of nowhere and grants me a wish. When I state it to her because of the aura that gave no room for discussion and my temporary breakdown, I find myself back in time and end up saving Rukia and my past self's asses. I get a sword to my neck from my old mentor, and then I train my younger version in the means of fighting. I have to agree with ya, Kinji. Your current life pretty much sucks, the hollow cackled. Mugetsu frowned. While that is true, I am truly glad that it is this way. The way things are going, many people won't have to suffer by the time this ends. Tensa Zangetsu agreed on this matter. As soon as this ends, you will have to take some decisions to have a peaceful life, too. We cannot go back to our own time, I believe, but this realm's Ichigo is still present. You cannot take his place. A sad smile pulled at his lips. Yeah, you're right. It'll be hard to treat my sisters and my friends as if I am someone else. I bet Rukia already has her eyes on this time's Ichigo. Tensa stayed silent. In this situation, there was no advice he could possibly give. His master's heart had been struck, and it seemed that not even going back in time to see his loved one again won't heal it. The Hollow, however, didn't seem to agree with the Zanpakuto. and he made his opinion known, pretty loudly too. Oi, don't you dare go all mopey on me again. You still have time to fight for da queen. There's no way your weak, past self would win against ya, he shouted in annoyance. Unfortunately, that seemed to bring Mugetsu's morale even lower. But it wouldn't be fair. I guess I really don't belong here. We're outcasts, aren't we, Hollow? We are. But that's not going to stop us from going further, he replied. Come to think of it, we should give you a name, don't you think? The Transcender said. Do what you want. Just make it badass, said Hollow answered cockily. Okay, what about Demonio del Infierno? At this point, the black-haired male was really proud of his accomplishments in Spanish class. Tensa Zenjutsu had raised a curious eyebrow, while the Hollow was busy repeating his new name. Now that's really badass enough to fit me. Did you suddenly grow a brain and a pair o' balls, Kinji? Mugetsu scowled. Shut up, or next time I won't be this kind again. Feeling Tensa's unmentioned questions, he continued. He's part of my power too. Felt like giving him a name just like you have. His new name might help you out in the future, he said enigmatically. Sighing, he cut off his conversation and headed to look for Urahara. Urahara-san, Mugetsu called in the dark room. A few moments later, a light was flipped open and he could see said man sitting in a chair next to a desk with a computer. Mugetsu, I take it your training with Ichigo was successful, he asked. The black-haired man nodded. I gave him these last days until we take off to relax. While I admit that it would be wonderful to have him train more, something that could give better chances of survival, he is still just a boy. Too much war is going to force him to mature early, something I don't want to happen, and I think neither do you. Ah, about the trip. Inao Oraheim and Sado Yasutoro will join you. Yoruichi talked to them and trained them, Urahara informed. Seeing the absent look on the other man's face, he continued. Mugetsu-san, the man looked at him. Are you really sure that you can take down Aizen? Mugetsu frowned. I wouldn't risk so many people's lives if I couldn't. Could have just left it as it is, since he can't retrieve the Hogyoku anyway. But since I can, I'd rather he doesn't complicate our situation with the Gaudy 13. Urahara nodded. Also, we should make a decision on what to do with the Hogyoku before you leave. What do you suggest? The Transcender closed his eyes in thought, sharing a quick discussion with his partners. Hand it to me. I'll try and destroy it, he muttered. As soon as the violet orb touched the man's hand, though, it started glowing brightly, shocking both of them. The formerly orange-haired man heard a serene voice ring in his head. Kurosaki Ichigo, your heart has been deemed worthy of my servitude. I shall grant you your heart's desires. Mugetsu's eyes widened. What? The scowling, he addressed the voice. I do not require your assistance. My only desire is that you are destroyed. The being giggled. Truly? Then is it not true that you wish to be loved back? To be yourself in this realm? I can help you to gain your own existence here. Hearing this, he stared in shock and swallowed heavily. I don't. He felt his Zanpakuto's presence, but the sword spirit was held back by the new being. Through the struggling, Mugetsu felt a wave of despair from the sword and took a deep breath. Clearing his mind and heart, he focused on the Hogyoku. Fine, I accept you. The being laughed and Tensa yelled at his wielder. The Hollow was silently fuming at his actions. As soon as the Hogyoku started floating towards his heart, Mugetsu entered his inner world. Violet roots were spreading from a completely white being and reaching for the blue skyscrapers. The young man that was Tensa Zenjutsu was staring at him, a disappointed frown present on his pale face. Demonio del Infierno was also standing on the side of a building, not even facing his king. Mugetsu stared at the new being in his soul. It was a humanoid figure, no hair or clothes present, only a pure white bone-like structure and violet eyes. You will not regret your wise choice, the being said. I don't, Mugetsu said, getting close to the being. When he noticed a couple of roots finally touching the buildings, he started walking faster. Reaching the being, he put a hand on its shoulder. The being was staring at him warily. "I don't and I won't, because you won't be here long," he yelled, raising an arm and materializing Tensa Zenjutsu, Getsuga Tenshu. The pure black arc hit Hogyoku, the being splitting cleanly in two, eyes wide even as it was fading. "Ichigo," the sword whispered in shock. "You really thought I'd risk my sanity just for acceptance? I'd rather work hard for it," Mugetsu said hatefully. "With this, there will be no more overpowered enemies." "Guess ya aren't that much of a pansy anymore," Demonio said, grinning. The black-haired man grinned back, focusing back to the living world. Raising his hand to look at it, the Hogyoku soon broke and the trapped spirits rose to the sky, disappearing. He smiled. They probably re-entered the cycle of life. He noticed Urahara staring at him in awe. "Done," he said smugly. The shopkeeper blinked again and again. "You never cease to surprise me, Mugetsu-san," the shopkeeper said wearily. Said man only chuckled. A cold night breeze hit Mugetsu's uncovered face, making him close his eyes to relax and his long, black and unruly hair to blow back. He sighed heavily as he watched the still Karakura town from his place on a telephone pole. Memories hit him like the merciless waves of a stormy sea, a broken frown marring his features. He remembered his Yuzu's kind smile and bright eyes, Karen's similar to his scowl and laugh as they played soccer, his father's insane antics and his mother's lovely features as well as her long, light brown hair, always neatly kept. His eyes lingered on an apartment complex, and he recalled Ishida's smartass remarks at his person, slowly followed by the memory of their fights together. A fight also brought back Chad's gentle and calm expression and his chivalry as he helped others and helped him fight the punks that always attacked him, either verbally or physically. Mugetsu's lips curled in a little smile as he imagined Oroheim's bubbly antics and her weird concoctions, and the way her eyes watched him as she healed him, with such love he was disappointed to say couldn't return. Another breeze hit his face, and he jumped on a nearby rooftop, plopping himself on it and watching Karakura, more and more bitter memories hitting him. Soon, he felt a new presence and sighed, face turning emotionless. "This is the fourth time you sighed. Did your alter ego finally catch up to you?" he heard a masculine voice. Chuckling, he replied, "Shut up, Yoruichi." Said cat was watching him with curious and slightly disappointed golden eyes. Sensing her unasked question, he turned to look somewhere else. Finally, after a while, he spoke, "You know, I'm really glad to be back." The cat approached him. "You certainly don't look like it." He smirked. "That's because I've finally overwhelmed you." If Cat could raise eyebrows, hers would have been raised. "Really?" she retorted unbelieving. Soon, his smirk no longer reached his eyes, and he turned to look at her. "I truly am glad to be back. It's just," he trailed off, and they fell into silence. A few moments later, Yoruichi spoke up. "No one's asking you to save the world. We could not stop Aizen's hand from influencing your lifetime, but I do not regret not being able to stop him, because in a way, it helped you grow in the man you are now. Still, considering what may have happened to you, you have all the rights to refuse to be the hero. You have all the rights to be yourself here." Sighing again, he smiled weakly and scratched Yoruichi's ears. "How long have you known?" Stopping her purring to answer, she chuckled. "I'm your godmother, Ichigo. I knew it the moment you arrived. Where you came from and how you did it had me lost for a while, though, and the latter still eludes me." "I'm quite lost on how I got here too, believe me," Mugetsu replied, shifting himself so that he could have a better view of the sunset. The sun's rays gave the sky an orange-pink tint, reminding him of the walks with his mother. "She's still with us. Masaki Channel never stopped watching us," the cat said. The black-haired male smiled. "I know, but she doesn't have to. Her job is done here. It's my turn to watch my younger self. And I have you and Kisuke, Dad, and my friends. I don't need anything else. Yoruichi inwardly smiled, and she joined her student in watching the sun as it left their part of the sky and made room for the moon. Chapter 4 Ode of the Fallen. Fate, you bitch, Mugetsu mentally complained as he, his younger self, Ishida, Chad, Inao and Yoruichi in her cat form traveled through the Dangai. Ishida had been watching him with his hawk eye, not sure if he could trust him, but seeing how he was now being ungracefully carried by Chad, he forgot about that, for the time being. Inao, on the other hand, warmed up really fast to him, and even made him promise he would let her braid his hair when they got back. Chad was his usual self, nodding at him to show that he acknowledges him as a comrade, and that he would fight to help him as long as he would help back. At the moment, he had a fairly nice re-meeting with his friends, and almost couldn't rein in the happiness over seeing them alive. He was finally accepting the fact that he would no longer have the same bonds he had built with his loved ones, but decided that their happiness was enough and that he could create them again. While he was thinking, they had reached the end of the ride, and though the others ended up kissing the ground, he gathered Rise-He under his feet and landed graciously. Well, as gracious as a man can get. He watched as his younger self ended up in a rather freakish pose. He grimaced, and heard Inao make a childish comment and felt the sudden urge to laugh, even more so as he watched Ishida bring out a backup cape as Ichigo and Chad's sweat dropped. He shared a glance with Yoruichi, and when she nodded, he shunpoed away behind a few vacant houses. After Ichigo fought Jidanbo and he raised the gate, just before Jin could cut his arm, he flash-stepped inside Sarate, the soon-to-be traitor only feeling a slight breeze pass by him as the gate started falling. After the gate had closed completely, he quickly grabbed Jin from behind, covering his mouth with a hand. Until they reached the sewers, the captain had not struggled at all, as if he had the situation under control. However, one of his eyes was opened, showing a suspicious light blue eye. Releasing the Teichu, Mugetsu sighed. "All right, I'm pretty sure you don't know who I am, and I'm not gonna freak you out by starting to explain that now. Listen closely, Ikomaru Jin, for I am not gonna repeat it. You have to leave Aizen's side." Ikomaru's eyes widened and he put a hand on his Zanpakuto. "And don't even try to fool me, I know you're planning to end him too." At this, he removed his hand, but still looked slightly wary. "If ye know I'm trying to betray him, why are ye telling me this?" he asked, blue eyes searching him as if he tried to find something familiar. "Because you're going to die if you follow him. I know you're trying to make Rangaku-san happy by killing him, but she's certainly going to be worse if you die. Don't worry, I'm going to put an end to his madness. Do what he tells you to do until I interfere. Then you will be free," Mugetsu explained. Jin stood there, staring at him in shock, but the moment he tried to ask, the black-haired male shook his head. "Don't ask. I will explain someday, but now is too early. Just trust me." The 3rd Division captain nodded, and with that, he flash-stepped away again, this time hiding in Urahara's cave, waiting for the moment to interfere. I sincerely hope nothing will change. Yoruichi traveled through the Sarate, searching for Ichigo's Ryatsu and going in his direction the moment she found it. Surrounded by a dreadful feeling, she remembered the plan Mugetsu shared with her. "For this to work, we're going to have to repair what I changed. Aizen must not doubt anything." And so, they had told Rukia to surrender to the Soul Society soon after Ichigo finished his training. This way, they'd have way more time to train and sort things out, too. Mugetsu had already entered the Sarate, through the west gate and headed for her and Urahara's training cave. He told her to teach Ichigo Bankai and let the future encounters flow. Ichigo would trust his instinct and things would go just as his older self would want them. Mentally sighing in concern, she picked Ichigo up and took him to the rendezvous point. Surprisingly, Ichigo had got the idea about Bankai very smoothly, and they managed to get him achieve it in under 3 days. After that, Mugetsu pounded into him a bit until he got a vague idea about strategic thinking and use of various techniques, as well as mastering his special attack. Reaching the cave, the Shihuan princess had understood why Mugetsu had to get earlier there, as he had gathered a bloody and tired Quincy and a half-dead Chad. Orihime had taken to healing their wounds, though, and they recuperated pretty quickly. They had finally reached the time limit and they would have to plunge into battle again. She watched as Ichigo fixed his bandages and Ishida smoothed out any wrinkles on his outfit. Raising a slender, violet eyebrow, she turned to look at Mugetsu, who had been sitting on a boulder, keeping quiet for quite a while. "Nervous?" she asked teasingly. To her surprise, Mugetsu nodded. "Don't be. You have reasons not to be." They shared a quick glance, as no further words were necessary. Ichigo, from his own corner of the room, had been watching Mugetsu too. He had learned a lot from this stranger over the few weeks they knew each other, though he has also learned to fear and respect him. His skills and strength were tremendous, and he was sure he had not seen even half of it. The Shinigami found himself amazed at the pace at which he grew to trust this stranger, if only by his words, which always held this sincerity to them. Still, he could not shake off the weird feeling he had around the black-haired male, as if there was something that connected them. It made him worry, but he told himself that even if there was something horrifying behind this connection, they would be able to work together and solve it. Or at least so he had hoped. "Cast off your fear, Ichigo. You are not the only one feeling that, and I assure you there is nothing you should worry about. All shall be revealed." With small, slow steps, Zangetsu said inside his mind. "Thanks, Asen," he mentally murmured, wiping the frown off his face, or at least, the more accentuated frown. Opening the eyes he had not realized he'd closed, the orange-haired Shinigami placed his trusty Zanpakuto on his back and prepared himself for the battles to come. Rukia could only watch as every Shinigami that even tried to stand up to Aizen met the ground, their blood covering it. She had been, albeit selfishly, hoping that they would defeat this villain, for she did not know what would come of her if he were to find out she no longer held the Hogyoku. And in this moment, she knew there was no escape. Aizen had lifted her by her collar and would now use a technique with which he would supposedly be able to enter her soul to take it out. Take out what wasn't there. And just as his eyes widened, the Ice Wielder's favorite savior appeared. "Mugetsu," she whispered wide-eyed as she was once again held, this time in a bandage-garbed arm. His black hair was blown by the wind, his hakama billowing behind him like black flames. Mugetsu looked at her with his blood-red eyes, and a glint of relief surged within them. She smiled reassuringly, showing she wasn't hurt. Turning back his attention to the enemy, she saw her savior's eyes drift towards Ikamaru Jin, who nodded, this ordeal going without Aizen's notice. And despite still being present, Aizen had a shocked expression on his face, something that surprised Rukia. Inwardly, she smirked. "Karma has gotten hold of a whip, Aizen, and she's coming for you." Still, Aizen had gotten hold of his composure pretty fast. Smiling pleasantly, he slowly advanced towards them. The Kuchiki, despite trusting in Mugetsu's strength, felt fear grip at her heart once again, and in turn, she gripped Mugetsu's arm. "And to whom do I owe this pleasure? Who shall I cut down next?" Aizen asked. Mugetsu did not ask, instead moved Rukia in his other arm, the one with tattoos. Smile not faltering, Aizen continued walking towards the strange male. The black-haired male did not move from his place, either, and the moment Aizen was just a foot away from him, he gripped Rukia tightly. "No words? Fine by me. You will go down silently, something that pleases me," he said, raising Kyoka Suijutsu to cut at the stranger. Only to be shocked once again. Aizen could only stare at the bandaged hand that had stopped his sword, ironically the same way he had stopped Kurosaki Ichigo's. One finger. He lifted his head to find the male's eyes, only to find a determinate stare, a will of steel behind those red eyes. Aizen Flash stepped away from him and started throwing Kaido spells at him, which Mugetsu repelled with his only free hand. And so, Aizen had tried to take him down, either with his Zanpakuto, with Hadu and Bakudo, or combinations of the two. Slowly, the Gotti 13 and the rest of the Ryoka group had arrived at the scene, only to stop and watch Aizen's desperate struggles. "Why?" he had finally screamed. "Why are you able to defend yourself against me? Who are you?" At this, Mugetsu put Rukia down, who proceeded to fall to her knees, and started advancing towards the villain. "I am your failed experiment, Aizen Sasuke," Mugetsu bitterly said. Raising his fists, black flame like Ryatsu covered them. He punched Aizen in the face, making dust rise around the crater he had formed when he landed. The Transcender stood in one place and waited for Aizen to either come at him or run away. And, just as he expected, the madman charged. Blocking his Zanpakuto with a finger, he launched another fist at the traitor, this time meeting his sword. Not retreating, he pushed further and broke the madman's partner, then caught him by his neck. Aizen desperately looked towards Jin, who had yet to move from his place. Mugetsu smirked behind his mask. "It certainly took you a while to realize you no longer have any allies," he whispered sadistically. The older Ichigo just couldn't resist the hollow's urges. The villain's eyes darted frantically, noticing that Towson was not there either, until he realized something. Aizen smirked. "I am afraid you are quite mistaken." And then a rip appeared in the sky, countless Gillians appearing inside. Soon, negation was cast over Aizen, and Mugetsu had to flash step away from him. Gritting his teeth, Mugetsu summoned a black, Rise-He-like sword. "You are not getting away again, Aizen," the black-haired male screamed, launching towards the protected Aizen. Time seemed to flow slower, as Yoruichi's eyes widened and she opened her mouth to stop him, and Rukia's heart stopped, her empty stare following their only hope to win. Mugetsu raised his sword with his right hand, the other clenched in a fist behind him, and it soon made contact with the negation. Aizen's confident smile broke, and his face took an expression of horror. And the negation broke, golden pieces falling all around the Shinigami, the traitor, and the Transcender. Said Transcender had finally reached Aizen, who fell back down from his floating state. Taking a few steps back and griping the Rise-He sword with both hands, he drew it back and charged Aizen. Giving a battle cry, he plunged the sword in the enemy's chest, successfully striking his heart. The Gotai could only watch in awe and slight fear as the bandage-wearing stranger let the makeshift sword disperse, making Aizen's dying form collapse to the ground. Turning his head so he could see the one that had injured him, Aizen muttered his final question. "Who or why you?" Mugetsu smiled sadly. "I am your failed experiment, Aizen. I am Kurosaki Ichigo," he whispered. Aizen moved his head slightly, and he spotted a younger, orange-haired, awestruck Kurosaki Ichigo, lying on the ground almost the same way as him, covered by merciless cuts and surrounded by blood. Chuckling, Aizen's gaze drifted one more time towards the older version of the fiery Ryoka. And so, Soul Society's most feared enemy had given his last breath. And all hell broke loose. Ease flickered uncaringly amongst the Shinigami who were holding their swords at his neck. "Remove your blades, Soul Reapers," he said. "Ryoka, by the order of the Gotti 13 and the royal family, you are hereby arrested," Soifan announced coldly. The black-haired male raised an eyebrow. "After I saved you asses? Have you no shame?" Soifan blushed in embarrassment and made a move to attack him. He simply grabbed her Zanpakuto and threw it aside. Shunsui and Jushiro Flash stepped behind Soifan, the head captain following close after them. "Soifan Teichu, Kamamura Teichu, Kuchiki Teichu, step aside from the Ryoka," Yamamoto ordered. They did as told, and he approached Mugetsu. "What are you going to do with Aizen Sasuke's corpse?" Mugetsu regarded him with a half-stare. "I am going to bury it. He might have been a villain and a madman, but in the end, he was just a very lonely man," he said. The captains looked at him oddly, and the captain commander raised an eyebrow, but allowed him to pass nonetheless. The remaining leaders of the Gotti 13 watched as the man disappeared in a blur of black, completely vanishing from their sight or senses. Saorichu-sama, was it really wise to let him go? Kamamura asked. Yamamoto didn't turn to look at him. No man with such a heart would ever do evil. Yet, I believe all we can do is wait and watch. Kurosaki Ichigo. Soul Society is in your group's debt, as you stopped Kuchiki Rukia's execution and threw that stalled Aizen Saosuke's plans. Because of that, I am here to hand you the title of Substitute Shinigami, as well as this seal of approval that proves who you are, Yukitake said, handing Ichigo his badge. He then moved to face Mugetsu. Although your group stopped Aizen's plans, you are the one who truly killed the traitor and therefore saved the entire afterlife. Mugetsu-san, as your name needs yet to be revealed, Yukitake said this with an amused smile. You are to be known as the protector of Soul Society, and we would be honored if you would join us when a new enemy appears. If you agree, you can keep contact with the Gode 13 through Urahara Kisuke. At the end, Yukitake bowed and Mugetsu put a hand on his shoulder, stopping him, as he was glad his blush could not be seen. Mugetsu, Rukia called, approaching the Senkamen. He only stood there as they stared at each other. The older Ichigo had to admit that he was feeling a little pained at the thought of leaving her again. He tried to say something, but he quickly closed his mouth and bit his lip. Rukia smiled. Take care. Despite her smile, he could not return it. Instead, he took a stony expression and turned to walk towards the gate. Her smile faltered and she frowned a bit. Stopping in his tracks, he just knew he was going to regret it. He turned to face her and clenched his fists. I'll miss you. A lot, he murmured. Kuchiki Byakuya's eyebrows twitched and Rukia stood there speechless. A dazed grin took over her porcelain features. I'll miss you too, she whispered, blushing. Renji stared at her in shock and Mugetsu felt the need to blush too. Instead, he turned and left without any more words. He stood on Urahara's flying carpet, saying goodbye each time a friend climbed down. He chuckled when Orihime told him she'd come for his hair one of these days. Ichigo turned to look him. Ni, Mugetsu-san, where do you stay? He innocently asked. Mugetsu's eyes widened. As a matter of fact, I don't really have a place to stay. He turned to stare pleadingly at Urahara. Said scientist-turned-shopkeeper put his arms up in surrender. Tessai has been hinting at me to organize a vacation for a long, long time, he mock-whined. The transcender glared at the seemingly innocent man. Ichigo's sweat dropped and raised a hand. You could stay with me, I guess. Mugetsu turned to stare at him. Suddenly, he realized what this meant. I'd get to see Yusu and Karin and Dad. He noticed Urahara staring at him with a knowing look. Closing his eyes, Mugetsu mentally chuckled. Thanks, Ichigo. I'll be there in the morning. I have to get a gigi first, he replied. Ichigo nodded and got off, seeing how they arrived at his house. See you in the morning, Ichigo said, waving. Mugetsu waved back and he, Urahara and his crew flew away. Entering his body after he ejected Kon and laying in his bed, he put his hands behind his head and stared at the ceiling in deep thought. Man, how am I going to explain this to my family? I just hope old man won't embarrass me in front of him, he thought, blushing and covering his face with his pillow. Although he wouldn't admit it, he respected the older teen a lot and somehow always wanted to make him proud, especially after he got his ass rafa-stomped by Aizen. Sighing, he tried to brush off such thoughts. He'd never wanted to impress someone so much, and to be real, he never liked thinking of it. But for the moment, he accepted it as it was, and instead chose to get a short sleep until he'd have to solve this shit. Ichigo already told them he'd offered a friend with no parents and home to stay with them. But to say that Karin was lightly surprised, as she always is an understatement. Around 9 in the morning, their guest arrived. First of all, it was a he. While she doesn't take her father's words to heart, she was beginning to think her brother was really gay. Until he brought Rukia home. Then the old goat said he was a pervert, just like him. And after a while, she almost believed that, basing it on the fact that he was a teenager male. And he yet again crushed that fact. He brought home a man, not a boy. They claimed he was only about 17, yet his eyes and composure conflicted with that. Second of all, he was tall, as in a head or so taller than her brother. So tall, she had to look up to see his face. Third of all, he had long black hair, so long it reached the small of his back, and he had it in a high ponytail. Karen was sure that, if he let it down, it would reach past his waist. And right now, the Kurosaki family was staring at him and Ichigo in shock. Ichigo seemed to be nervous about something, another thing that led her to believe he was gay. "I'm Mugetsu. Thank you for your hospitality," the man said simply. Isshin seemed to recover from his shock and he started to cry, running to his dead wife's poster. "Masaki Tilda, my son is truly gay. He can no longer give me grandbabies. Whatever shall we do?" he whined. Ichigo covered his face with his hands, as if wanting to disappear from the scene. Mugetsu chuckled a bit and bowed to Yuzu. "It's nice to meet you." Despite her father's cries, Yuzu seemed to like this guest of theirs and immediately blushed and bowed back. "My name is Kurosaki Yuzu, Ikai Nyai's sister. It's nice to meet you too, Mugetsu-san," she said pleasantly. She glanced at Karen, as if telling her to introduce herself. The older twin rolled her eyes and came before the guest. "Karen," she said, sticking her hand for him to shake. "Mugetsu," he returned as if it was something normal, and shook her hand. Yuzu stared at them in confusion but brushed it off, inviting her guest inside. Out of nowhere, Isshin sprung back into action. "Nevertheless, I am going to accept you into the family, since I am the best daddy. Now come to my bosom, Mugetsu, my second son," he sang, launching himself at the black-haired teen, arms positioned for a hug. And the Kurosaki siblings stared in shock at what occurred. The moment the Kurosaki patriarch was just an arm away from Mugetsu, the teen jumped back in the air and landed a kick in the overbearing man's head, successfully digging his head in the ground. Mugetsu scoffed at the man and resumed to following Yuzu. "Sorry for the floor, Yuzu," he murmured. Karen stared at him with stars in her eyes. "Ichigo, you have my blessing. You can marry him," she said. Ichigo turned red. "What the hell, Karen?" Mugetsu raised an eyebrow. "I already love a woman," he said flatly. Ichigo stared at him in shock again, as he never expected something like that to come out of the older teen's mouth. "Ooh," the black-haired girl made. "Does she love you back?" "Karen-chan, that's private," Yuzu protested. Karen shrugged. Mugetsu frowned. Shrugging, the older teen looked away. "I don't know." Ichigo glanced at him, only to see that he had already engaged Yuzu in conversation. Frowning, he stored the thoughts related to that subject for later. After dinner, he and Mugetsu had gone to his room to simply spend the time. "Are you going to join my school?" Ichigo asked. He was lying on his bed, reading a book. Mugetsu was sitting on his desk chair, hands behind his head. "Maybe. I never really got to finish junior year," he answered. "Really?" Ichigo asked, now curious. "Why?" The older male hesitated. "I got stuck with Shinigami powers and it's a long story. Maybe I'll tell you another time." The orange head frowned and put his book aside. "Do you think I'll have to leave school because of my Shinigami powers?" "No," he answered almost instantaneously. "I'll make sure you live your life." Ichigo scowled in confusion, but he relaxed and a little smile curled his lips. "Thanks." Mugetsu didn't reply. Instead, he seemed to be staring at his guitar case. "Can I?" he finally asked, trailing off. Ichigo nodded, and he stood to grab the instrument. Unzipping the case, he took out the black guitar and placed it masterfully in his lap. Checking the strings, Mugetsu took a deep breath and struck the chords. He began playing a sad song, his mouth parting as if he was whispering lyrics. He closed his eyes when he reached the chorus, and at the end, the song sounded a bit happier. Opening his eyes as his fingers left the strings, he turned to look at Ichigo. The boy was staring at him in awe. "That was, where the hell did you learn such a great song? Did you compose it?" he said breathlessly. Mugetsu smiled. "My best friend composed it. It's called Will of the Heart," he replied. "Amazing," Ichigo said, grinning. "Can you teach me?" The older teen shook his head, an amused smirk present on his face. "Maybe some other time, though I don't promise to do it." The orange-haired teen looked disappointed, like a kid who can't get his favorite toy. Mugetsu chuckled at his face. "What's so funny?" Ichigo asked, pouting. Mugetsu laughed even harder, and the younger teen turned red and threw a pillow in his face. He stopped laughing, startled by the pillow, and gave a quiet yelp. When Ichigo laughed too, Mugetsu grabbed the pillow and climbed the bed to beat his younger self with it. Yuzu, Isshin, and Karin stood just outside Ichigo's room, and they looked surprised to hear Ichigo laugh so much. Soon, the semester started, and Ichigo had to go to school. Of course, this meant he'd have to drag his older brother as well. He had been staying with them for almost a week, and his sisters had already gotten to calling him Getsu Niai. Currently, he was waiting for Mugetsu to get ready as well. He was just opening his mouth to call him out, when he was interrupted. "Shut up, Ichigo." "I'm done," Mugetsu said, climbing down the stairs. Ichigo would have offered him one of his uniforms, but they were surprisingly too small for him, and so had to go shopping with Yusu. The older teen entitled that day the Traumatic Shopping Spree. He had on the traditional gray pants and gray jacket, but the jacket was left open and his white shirt had 2 buttons undone. He had his hair done in a high ponytail, as usual. "Let's go," he said, grabbing a piece of bread and munching on it. "Aichiai." "Guo mph," Ichigo greeted Keiko as usual, the latter running at him to grab him, and the former clotheslining him. Mugetsu raised an eyebrow from behind them. "Did that always happen?" "Every single day," Kinji, the hollow, commented. "You've been surprisingly silent for a while. What happened?" Mugetsu asked. The hollow, for the first time in Mugetsu's life, hesitated. "We'll talk about this later, Ichigo." When we're alone, Tensa Zenjutsu spoke up, and with that, they cut off the mental connection. Deciding he'd worry later, Mugetsu noticed Keigo staring at him. "Ni Ichigo, who's this guy?" he asked, pointing at him. Mugetsu scowled and kicked him over the head, digging his head in the ground like he usually did to his dad. "Don't you know it's rude to point at people?" the black-haired male asked, keeping his foot on Keigo's head. He heard muffled apologies and released him. "He's Mugetsu, transfer student, older than us. Lives with me and my family," Ichigo described lazily. Mugetsu glared at him. "I'm that unimportant, huh?" When Ichigo scoffed, he grabbed him in a headlock and gave him a noogie. I'm sorry," Ichigo surrendered and rubbed his head the moment the older teen released him. Keigo and Mizuru watched this occur with confused faces. After a few minutes of them bickering, Ichigo losing, they parted as Mugetsu headed for his own class. Behind him, Ichigo's female classmates sighed dreamily. "Kurosaki, was that hunk your brother?" one asked. "There's no way that Cutie would be awful Kurosaki's relative," another complained. "I mean, Kurosaki's all blinding orange, and his face is scary," said Orange Head, scowled as a vein throbbed in his head. He turned to glare at the gossiping girls, and they cowered and dispersed. In the meanwhile, Keigo was laughing his ass off at Ichigo's predicament, successfully receiving a punch in the face from his embarrassed friend. During lunch, Ichigo asked Mugetsu to join him and his group on the rooftop. Mugetsu nibbled on the bento Yusu made for him, and the others chatted. "Ni Getsu, when are you going to let Inao braid your hair?" Ichigo teased. Their friends laughed as Oriheim got all excited and Mugetsu blushed, mumbling curses at Ichigo as he looked somewhere else. "About that, why don't you cut your hair, Mugetsu-san? Doesn't it bother you?" Tatsuki asked. Oriheim had dragged her along. Said long-haired male frowned. "Actually, I haven't really thought about that. I guess it never really bothered me. Why, do you like short-haired guys, Arasawa-san? Maybe orange-haired? He teased, grinning at her. He knew about Tatsuki's unnoticeable crush on his younger self. He wasn't blind, he just didn't have time to complicate things. He also knew it was not healthy to sacrifice your feelings like that. Unsurprisingly, Tatsuki and Ichigo blushed. The others laughed and Tatsuki whacked him over the head. What the hell? We're just old friends, they shouted together. Ichigo, despite his and Mugetsu's closeness, didn't want to punch or kick the older teen like that. Mugetsu rubbed his head, smirking. Don't worry, Arasawa-san. Your secret is safe with me, he teased further, making their public laugh even harder, and the victim pounded her fists in his arm. For the meanwhile, things had returned to normalcy. For the meanwhile, Mugetsu's dream of regaining his friends seemed reachable. Moonless Skies Touch. Second Arc, The Arankars. Chapter 6 Vizard. A blonde male hovered somewhere above Karakura town, watching a familiar substitute Shinigami with a mysterious smirk. The smirk faded when the boy was approached by a few friends, one of which was a tall, black-haired male. TCH. He closed his eyes for a moment, scoffing. What's that look for, dorky teeth? His eyes flew open, and he found himself face to face with the same tall fellow he was watching a moment before. An amazing feat indeed, considering the fact that our blonde male was standing upside down, on air. He stumbled for a second, the water in his bottle flowing down, pulled by gravitation. Mugetsu watched this with amused eyes. Seems like you didn't really expect me to pop up over here. The man shot him a look and furrowed his eyebrows. Ya know why I'm air. Who are ya? Usually, I would have scolded you for not introducing yourself first, but I'll overlook it this time. Hirako Shinji, our hero said playfully. Shinji stared at him in mild surprise. I am Mugetsu, and yes, I am a Vizard, too, just like the boy you've been watching so carefully. Shinji narrowed his eyes. What does Aizen want? Mugetsu sighed. I'm sure he would have wanted a lot, but unfortunately, he can't really force people to submit while he's 6 feet under the ground. Look, I really have no time for this. Aizen is dead. I killed him. Soul Society owes me. I'm a Vizard and I want you to take care of Ichigo's hollow side. Just wait for me at your warehouse tonight. I'll explain more there. And with that, Shinji was left there, standing with his mouth half open, trying to process what had just occurred. Ichigo motioned for his friends to walk ahead, and he stood behind, staring with a frown at the sky. Mugetsu told him he had to take care of something and vanished. For the short time the orange-haired boy had known the older teen, Mugetsu had been very distant and mysterious. Despite their newfound close friendship, he knew near to nothing about him. He didn't know if he had a family, he didn't know where he lived, he didn't even know who was the woman he said he loved. And still, despite the slightly cold shoulder, Ichigo couldn't get himself to be angry at his friend. The way he was there for him when he was weak, and the way his red eyes showed suffering when he looked at his sisters made him want to only comfort him. Scrunching his nose, he shook his head. He sounded gay. Maybe I should take up Mugetsu's offer about finding a girl to date. Oyaji's predictions are rubbing off on me. Closing his eyes and sighing, Ichigo started heading for school. He was already kinda late, and he knew his sensei wasn't that relenting anymore. The door to Ichigo's bedroom opened and closed before you could blink. The orange-haired teen jumped at the sound of the door opening and turned to face the intruder, sighing in relief and slumping back the moment he recognized the blank features of Mugetsu. Something wrong? He asked carefully. Mugetsu, who had stopped walking after he closed the door and stared at the ground absently, suddenly looked back up to him, almost as if startled. He closed his eyes and shook his head, then looked at him once again. Just me and my old man musings, he joked. Turning more serious, he spoke again. There's something we need to go to and take care of, but before we go, you must promise me 2 things. Ichigo scowled in confusion for a second and then nodded in determination. I'll help with whatever you need me for. Shoot. For a moment, the black-haired male seemed to smile almost bitterly, but quickly hid it. Well, it really more of your problem, but anyway, first, I want you to trust me to the very core of your heart. Whatever we're going to do, it's for your own good. I would explain more, but I'd rather Yuzu and Karen not find out so early. Already, Ichigo was staring at him with raised eyebrows, as if not knowing what to make of his explanation, but he nodded nonetheless. Second, you must swear you won't start having second thoughts on what we're about to do. If you even dare, I'll beat you until you end up sharing Aizen's grave, Mugetsu finished darkly. The younger teen swallowed heavily as a bead of sweat trickled down his temple and nodded again, this time more fervently. Fine. Oh, so mysterious, San. You should know by now that I trust you with my entire being, he retorted half-heartedly. Mugetsu smirked and ruffled his hair. You'd better. All right then, we should get going. There are some people we need to see to get this taken care of. With that, they went downstairs to announce his host family of his and Ichigo's departure. Is this the place? Ichigo asked, scanning the seemingly abandoned warehouse. Mugetsu only walked further only to stop abruptly. The younger teen raised an eyebrow. The older Ichigo turned his head halfway to glance at his younger self, sending him a sharp look. Take 2 steps back. He did as told and watched as Mugetsu seemed to touch an invisible wall which blurred like a wave. He could only raise the other eyebrow too as the black-haired male raised both arms and got in a stance, the left hand slightly behind with a palm wide open, and the other clenched in a fist. Only to be startled as a black flame made of Ryatsu slipped out of the fist, and the older male punched the invisible shield. Pieces of rice fell like broken glass and dispersed before they hit ground, but no sound came out of the impact or the shattering. He noticed Mugetsu walking again, with his hands in his pockets, and quickly followed. Suddenly, a breeze flew past his cheek, and his eyes widened as 8 unfamiliar faces showed themselves, each one showing a hostile expression. He realized he was falling on his butt as Mugetsu got in front of him and black Ryatsu surrounded the two of them, an unnoticeable hint of killing intent slipping from the older male's body. The 8 strangers stopped in their tracks at the sign of one of them and stared at the duo. Hirako Shinji. I thought Sarate Academy teaches manners too, if the parents or legal guardians are non-existent. Seems like I am yet again proven wrong, Mugetsu said calmly, though a hint of venom was present. He certainly did not like his younger self's life threatened in such a cowardly way. Hiyori seemed to want to lash out at him for that comment, but Kensei successfully held her back. The aforementioned blonde took a step closer to him. I didn't want to threaten ya, but you broke our shield. That's not nice. Ichigo got up as the black Ryatsu dispersed and the older male's posture seemed to relax. Well, I did tell you I would be coming. You shouldn't have put up a barrier only to hold me out. That's not nice either, so I believe we're even, Mugetsu pointed out. Shinji o-ed and his expression turned slightly more serious. His eyes flickered to Ichigo. Does he know anything yet? He asked vaguely. Not yet. But I'm not giving you the pleasure of explaining it to him. At that, Shinji pouted. Though, you could assist me while I'm storytelling. Ichigo scowled in confusion, and his eyes darted between the two of them. Shinji made a sign to his 7 friends, and they retreated to the shadows. Mugetsu sighed and crossed his legs, plopping himself on the ground. Shinji did the same, and Ichigo could only follow. Here goes nothing, Mugetsu urged himself. Have you been having these times when something took over your common senses and you lost control of your body? Preferably during fights? He asked simply, as if asking if he understood yesterday's homework. Ichigo hesitated, but shook his head when he remembered the promise he made to the older teen. Yeah, there's been this time when I was fighting Byakuya, just before Aizen's death. I felt like giving up, 'cause my body wouldn't move, and suddenly, I had this ominous feeling in my head. I blacked out. and when I realized what was happening, I was already ripping at some kind of mask, half on my face, while I was still struggling to control my own hand, he explained shamefully. Shinji glanced at Mugetsu. Yeah, well, you're not the only one. The only one with sanity issues, the blonde said. Ichigo raised an eyebrow when the black-haired teen nodded. You see, that thing that's trying to take over is a hollow. An inner hollow to be precise. At his explanation, Ichigo's eyes widened in horror. While it is kinda bad, it's good to know that the hollow formed during the time you were regaining your powers, and you weren't born with hollow powers. With exercise you could learn to control him, and that's why we're here. The orange-haired teen slumped forward, with his head in his hands. While he was slightly relieved to hear he could control this insanity, he still felt very wary of his own being. Can't I just get rid of this monster? He asked, a silver of despair present in his voice. At this, Mugetsu scowled and whacked him over the head, hard. Ichigo stared at his furious expression in shock. Your inner hollow is not a thing, nor a monster. No matter how harsh this may seem to you, inner hollows are derived from your own being. They're not foreign bacteria. He's only your negative traits. The hatred, the sorrow, the jealousy, and the greed you would never reveal. Still, he is a part of you, and you have to accept him, he explained angrily, panting a bit at the end of his mini-speech. The younger teen only stared at him slack-jawed, and even Shinji looked a bit shocked at his explanation. The exiled Shinigami were known throughout their few friends for their hatred of inner hollows and harsh acceptance. He may have been awakened at his way of thinking. Slowly, Ichigo nodded. Mugetsu knows what he's doing. He definitely wants to help me. I would have to be stupid to deny his words. Seems like the only choice I have is to confirm myself. Then, if I'm Shinigami, but I'm also hollow, what am I, really? At this, Mugetsu grinned. You're a hybrid, just like me and good ol' Shinji. We're called Vizards. Chapter 7 Moment of Weakness. One blonde Hirako Shinji's eyes followed the hollowed orange-haired teen's movements as he battled Kensei. They had only just begun Ichigo's training, and he was already going full out. His gray eyes flicked over to the mysterious person that brought the teen to them. Mugetsu was currently sitting cross-legged, with his arms resting lightly on his legs, and his eyes were closed. He didn't give Ichigo more than a glance as he started the hollification, after which he quickly settled. Shinji frowned when he felt a light sensation coming from the man's body. The black-haired being just kept surprising him more and more. *flashback*. The blonde-haired and the orange-haired Vizards watched as their third party raised his right hand and focused. There, a white mask with two parallel black stripes traveling the right and the left side appeared. Ichigo stared with an expression neither odd nor horrified but something in between. Shinji himself raised an eyebrow. As if sensing the raised eyebrow, Mugetsu spoke. This is my hollow mask. During to some circumstances, I can no longer wear it. Please don't make me explain. I'm not really sure of what happened either. However, my abilities are still there, but buried. He dematerialized the mask and turned to focus only on Shinji. Because of that, I'm going to enter my inner world during Ichigo's training. He doesn't need me to be able to defeat his hollow. I trust him. Shinji narrowed his eyes in thought and opened his mouth to comment, but chose not to. End of flashback. He sighed. Might as well leave this alone. I don't want to risk anything. Mugetsu's deep red eyes flew open. He scanned his surroundings and recognized the sideways skyscrapers of his inner world. He stood and ran across the side of a skyscraper, jumping onto the next. He continued going until he noticed the hooded form of Tensa Zenjutsu standing on the very edge of a building. He called out his partner's name and the Zanpakuto turned to face him, taking his hood off. A somber expression was present on the young face of the spirit. What happened? He asked bluntly. He remembered the hollow's hesitation a week ago, and now this expression of Tensa's. Something must have been seriously wrong. Your soul is breaking down. the spirit just as bluntly answered. Mugetsu scowled in concern. He was definitely expecting some side effects from the time traveling, but this was really bad. Literally speaking, it is not really breaking down, but what is currently happening could lead to that too. The wielder raised an eyebrow at his partner's explanation, and Tensa turned his back to him. Come see for yourself. With that, the Transcender walked to the Zanpakutu's side and noticed a skyscraper taller and larger than the others in his inner world. If he estimated right, it was about the size of the Dubai's Burj Khalifa, and he wondered why the hell had he never noticed it before. Snapping out of his stupor, he noticed lots of broken windows at the base of it and the tip of its roof crumbling. That building represents your powers. Mugetsu's eyes widened in horror. The windows are memories of your abilities. With a few series of broken windows, you lose an ability. It seems that when Hogyoku was trying to reform your world, it already had a hold on the core of your soul. When you ripped him off, his hold on your power center disappeared. But with it so did the peak of the building. And the crumbling started with that. The black-haired man clenched his teeth as his mind raced for a solution. At first, it crumbled slower, but it seems then the more time passes, the faster it crumbles. Demonio tried to repair it, but it kept falling apart, he added solemnly. Red eyes closed tightly and the man clenched his fists, his hands shaking from the pressure. How long? His voice came out strained and desperate. Tensa bowed his head. 3 days. The shaking stopped. Mugetsu's hands stood motionless, unclenched. He fell on all fours, his black hair falling around his coiled body like a curtain. Tensa's blue eyes flicked over the approaching figure of Demonio del Inferno, and he nodded and then closed his eyes. The hollow scowled and opened his mouth. Just as he was about to bitch at his king, said man stood, took in a deep breath, and faced them with a determined expression. I'm going to make the best out of these 3 days, he yelled. The Zanpakutu smiled and the hollow scoffed. He was going to do that, and they would support him to do his best. Ichigo stared at his white doppelganger as he dissolved, his Bankai's blade piercing the hollow's stomach. Just as the hollow said his final words, he smirked. Don't you worry about that, partner. Next time isn't happening, he said. The crazed counterpart's eyes widened, before he grinned crazily and finally disappeared. Opening his eyes, Ichigo recognized the faces of the 8 Vizards. He grinned as he was collapsing to the ground. As he was trying to lift his head again, a shadow covered his sight. Good job, kid. You are granted 5 minutes of rest as reward, Mugetsu said seriously. He and his younger self stared at each other, the former serious and the latter disbelieving and desperate, before cracking up in laughter. Straightening his face, he spoke again. How are you feeling? Ichigo shifted and cringed. A bit roughed up, but other than that, fine. I feel like I found freedom. The older male smiled. That's good. Well, now we're gonna get you healed, then we can go home. Maybe we can find some leftovers from Yuzu's cooking. Agreed. The teen hummed and closed his eyes, smiling in appreciation. Definitely. I feel like eating a whale. Mugetsu chuckled and watched his younger self's serene expression with a soft smile. Dying seemed more worth it in that moment. He absently brushed off the stinging feeling in his chest. The next 2 days flew by, Mugetsu spending time with Ichigo and his friends in class, and with his family during free time. Ichigo noticed the older teen being much more social and cheerful during these days. He had even accepted Oriheim's request of them going over to her place. So here they were, seated on her couch, together with Tatsuki. The healer had asked Ishida too, but he had declined shyly, with a blush seemingly inexistent to only Oriheim. Ichigo stared at Mugetsu, as if trying to pry a hole through his head, to see what was going on in there. Tatsuki had apparently noticed this, as she broke the ice. Oriheim, didn't Getsu promise to let you do his hair? In reality, he had only promised to let her braid his hair, but despite what protest his older brother wanted to bring, Oriheim would have none of it. The bubbly auburn-haired woman immediately smiled goofily, brought her hands together and jumped, eyes sparkling in delight. Truly, Mugetsu-san, would you let me do it now? 10 minutes later, Ichigo found himself smirking in amusement at the black-haired male's predicament, who was currently stuck on a chair with an annoyed expression, as Orihime treaded a comb through his long, voluminous hair, not knowing what to start with. Said male threw him a half-hearted glare, to which he stuck out his tongue. He noticed Tatsuki staring at him in wonder. He raised an eyebrow. What? I didn't know you could stick out your tongue, she said, in mock shock. He glared at her and she smirked. Seriously now, Getsu changed you. You haven't been this lively ever since she died. At this statement, a sad smile stretched her lips. He did what I couldn't. Ichigo stared at her and thought. Suddenly, he grinned. But you were there. That's what's really important, isn't it? He remarked. Tatsuki threw him a surprised look, before smiling and turning back to watch the tortured Mugetsu, Ichigo not noticing the red tint her cheeks had taken. Mugetsu had been staring at the ground for a while, seemingly absent. Suddenly, he raised his head. Inao, can you please cut my hair, since you're already working on it? I haven't had a haircut in a long, long while, and I've gotten a little sick of it, he requested. Ichigo, Tatsuki, and Orihime just had to look a little surprised at this. They had gotten used to him having long hair, but apparently he was the short-haired kind of guy. They really had no idea what he might look like with short hair. Alrighty, how short? She replied, going to find a pair of scissors. About shoulder length, he answered. After a while, Orihime returned and settled behind him, taking hold of an ebon lock. Mugetsu's breath hitched in his throat, and he wondered why. A clank could be heard, and his eyes slid over to Orihime's hands, through the mirror, as they stopped their movements. What the fuck, Ichigo? Tatsuki and Mugetsu found themselves muttering as they stared shell-shocked, while Orihime squeaked. Ichigo was too shocked to wince at the sound. In the healer's gentle hands rested a broken pair of scissors, now looking more like two separate blades, the locks in her other hand untouched. Is this for real? Mugetsu whined as he stared exasperatedly at the god-forsaken hair, or maybe even God-blessed. After Orihime had gotten out of her stupor, they decided to overlook the haircut accident, and she braided his hair carefully, after which the three each headed for their own homes. Along the way, Ichigo noticed the older teen suddenly stopping. When he turned to look at him, the orange head saw him staring at the river and the sunset casting pink and orange tints all over the sky. With soft eyes, he walked over to Mugetsu's side. Feeling sentimental, he joked. Mugetsu smiled sadly. Very. A breeze passed by them and blew his braided hair and the free locks surrounding his face. Ichigo analyzed his absent expression and sad eyes, and mused over possible reasons of melancholy, when he realized something. Mugetsu, he called seriously. Relaxed red eyes turned to regard him. Why are you so distant? The older teen's eyes instantly lost their cheerfulness, and he displayed a confused, and maybe even a little fearful, expression. I know you're getting closer to the other, and Dad, Yusu and Karin, but there's something off about you. Ever since my fight with the Hollow, you haven't even mentioned the afterlife, not the Soul Society, not the Shinigami, not even the Hollows we fight with every day. If there's something upsetting you, we're not here for nothing. I'm not your friend for nothing. Mugetsu had a concerned frown on his face as he regarded him with surprised eyes. After his explanation, the black head turned the other way again. Ichigo scowled and clenched his fists in anger. Stop closing yourself from us. You taught me to trust you, and through that you saved my life. It's my turn to help you, and I'm not letting this go unless you tell me what's wrong, he yelled, hurt evident in his voice. Mugetsu's shoulders tensed. You wouldn't understand. You can't help me with this. Don't worry, I'll be fine. If you would explain it to me, I would. We will get through it together, Ichigo said, will not breaking. What was about to occur, he certainly didn't expect. Mugetsu turned forcefully and closed his eyes in concentration. A strangely familiar black sword appeared in his right hand, before being morphing in an even more familiar large cleaver like Zanbatsu. As his blade changed form, his hair fell to the ground, shortening, losing its black color as it brightened from the roots, and it turned orange. He stared in shock as his eyes opened, and the red pools softened to a chocolate brown, and he was staring at an older, wiser copy of himself. Tears started rolling down the more mature cheeks, and Mugetsu, now Kurosaki Ichigo, clenched his teeth. I don't want to leave again. I don't want to die, he whispered, voice trembling. He was about to demand answers when... Thud. I don't want to leave again. I don't want to die, he whispered, voice trembling. He was about to demand answers when... Thud. The startled orange-haired teen watched in slow motion as his older self's eyes rolled back and he collapsed with a harsh landing. He stood for a few seconds, not really processing what was going on, until he realized the other's predicament. Ichigo considered going to Urahara's but remembered the older teen's appearance and decided it was best not to, since he couldn't reveal his identity to just anyone. He stood there frozen, not knowing what to do. He clenched his fists over the formerly black-haired male's chest and placed his forehead on it, back coiling as he closed his eyes and tried to shake off the agitation. How dare you leave me in the dark? Wake up and explain, Mugetsu, he yelled in frustration and uncertainty. I don't want to die. That single phrase rung out through his head and shook him. Before he realized, one tear, similar to those that Mugetsu had shed, ran down his own cheek and landed on said man's chest. He clenched his fists, his nails digging in his skin so hard, blood started leaking. Wake up, he screamed, digging his face in the Mugetsu's chest. As he screamed out his sorrow, a bright light enveloped the both of them. Gray eyes surveyed the tiny device a pair of hands was holding, analyzing each and every corner of it. Kisuke, said blonde Urahara. Kisuke put aside the device he had been working on to turn to answer Yorwichi. The dark-skinned woman appeared in the doorway, leaning casually against said door. Tesai wants your help with a few things in the shop, she explained nonchalantly. The scientist pouted in disappointment. Oh, and here I thought my dear kitty wanted me to assist her, he whined. Golden eyes narrowed at him and a smirk plastered itself on her face. She opened her mouth to verbally attack him, only to close it back abruptly and hers and her lover's eyes widened. She shared a startled look with the blonde, and he nodded. We need to contact Isshin, was the only thing he told her before she disappeared. Soft black lashes fluttered open to reveal chocolate brown orbs as they took some time to focus and readjust to the light. The first thing Ichigo noticed was that he was still resting his head on Mugetsu older Ichigo's chest. He shifted to a sitting position and looked around, trying to spot someone to help him. Just when he was about to give up, a blonde-haired girl came in through a door that he hadn't noticed before. She frowned before she kneeled next to him. Help me carry him. My mother can cure him, were her only words before she grabbed one of Mugetsu's arms and put it over her shoulder, before she stood and started walking back to the door. He spent only a moment to raise an eyebrow, before joining her by his other side. They passed through a long, and that means really long hall, before arriving to a small garden filled with all kinds of plants, over which the sun shone brightly, warming their bodies. In the very center of the garden sat a golden blonde-haired woman with kind blue eyes and dressed in a long, angelical white dress. Mother, I have brought him to you. He is in a state worse than expected, the girl carrying Mugetsu spoke, calling out to the other woman. They placed him next to the woman, who frowned at the sight of him. My Charmaine, leave us, the woman spoke calmly, undisturbed. Her daughter nodded and left the room, though not without her gaze lingering on Mugetsu's features for a moment longer. The woman placed a hand on Mugetsu's chest and closed her eyes. After a few minutes of uncomfortable fiddling, Ichigo almost breathed in relief when the blonde opened her eyes. She turned to look at him. Please place your hand on his chest. I am going to stabilize his soul, but I need help from you, his younger self, as he seems to be losing the memories of his past life, she requested. He nodded, and as soon as he placed his hand on his chest, he felt a light tug at his very being. A few moments of nothing happening made Ichigo very paranoid, until his older self started screaming in pain and clenching his teeth. The very sound of him screaming until he had no air left made him wince. He sighed when the screams stopped and closed his eyes to process what had happened up until then. Smiles, Anao, Tatsuki, broken scissors, distant Mugetsu, misunderstood intentions, black, no, orange hair, and brown eyes. Mugetsu crying, Mugetsu isn't Mugetsu. Mugetsu is Kurosaki Ichigo. Mugetsu is me. But how? He murmured within his mind, recollecting the memories that most likely caused this occurrence. Perhaps he is one of those, what do the humans call them? Ah, time travelers, Zangetsu offered helpfully. Ichigo frowned. Let's say he's actually me from the future. Why would he come here? And how? And just how much older is he really? The woman that is currently healing him must surely be one of those who know who he really is. You may start from here and ask her about him. She may even know how he came here. Ichigo hummed and stared at the ground absently. Just as he was about to ask the mysterious woman anything, a groan could be heard beside him. He turned to see Mugetsu slowly opening his brown eyes. Mugetsu blinked to shake off the drowsiness. Ichigo, where are we? He asked weakly, trying to get up. Ichigo scowled. I don't know either. At that phrase, his older self's eyes flew open, and he abruptly sat. He noticed the blonde woman next to them, and he froze. You're the one who brought me here. The blonde smiled kindly. Ichigo stared slack-jawed. Come again? Ichigo asked pathetically. Mugetsu gave no reply, only continued staring at the smiling woman. Your friend seems to have a few questions, Kurosaki-san. Pardon me, Mugetsu-san, the woman pointed out, quickly correcting herself. Mugetsu frowned in confusion and turned to stare at Ichigo only to notice his head lighter. He grabbed a lock close to his forehead to inspect it, only for his jaw to drop as he recalled the last few events. Why is it always about the hair? Mugetsu screamed in exasperation. The older teen dropped back his arm and sighed tiredly. All right, ask away. I do owe you an explanation. Ichigo took a deep breath and asked himself what to start with. Are you really from the future? Mugetsu nodded, and he frowned a bit. So then, how did you really come back? Mugetsu turned to look at the woman. That's something I'd like to know as well. Who are you and why did you bring me back? It's not that I don't appreciate it, really. It's only that each time someone helps me, they usually gain something in exchange. The woman nodded in understanding. My name is Erilyn. I am the Soul King's wife, or in other words, the Soul Queen. Your deeds, Kurosaki Ichigo, both past and future self, had saved all 4 dimensions, and my family as well, so on my daughter's notice, I decided to fulfill your last wish. We certainly are in greater debt, but for now, all I can do is help you build a path again, she explained, bowing. Mugetsu stared shocked. Ichigo stared even more shocked. Raising their hands to close each other's mouths, they regained their common sense. I feel honored. But what happened to me? My Zanpakuto told me there were 3 days until I would die, not 2, Mugetsu asked. Ichigo glared at him in disbelief at finding out he was dying, but the older teen waved it off with a look, as if telling him they would discuss later. You had forcefully reversed your progress when you called out your Bankai, and then sealed it off, accelerating the deterioration of your power center, Erilyn once again explained. At his questioning gaze, she continued, I used Ichigo-kun's memories to restore most of your own, but the only way to save you was to forcefully differentiate your existence from Ichigo-kun's. As you may have learned from human knowledge, when one being goes back in time, there are paradoxes that damage the time flow, as well as the well-being of the being and its previous forms. You and Ichigo-kun should have fused when you met, but you did not, and so your existence started fading, since there cannot be two of you. Mugetsu scowled and processed what was said. Ichigo watched as his eyes widened with understanding, something he didn't quite find yet. So that means... Erlen smiled. Yes, Mugetsu-san. You are your own existence now. You don't have to go back to your own timeline. You are now part of this timeline, too. A smile curled Mugetsu's lips, and it spread until it was a full-blown grin. Mugetsu fell on his back, and he laughed carelessly. Ichigo watched, not really understanding what he was so happy about, but nonetheless smiling at the other's delight. Mugetsu quickly composed himself. So then, what has really changed about me? That I am not Ichigo anymore? He asked, remembering potential changes in his inner world. You have not lost your strength, fret not, but the only way to stabilize your power center was to split it back, like it was before you used that technique. Your Shikai was lost, Mugetsu froze in fear. But your previous Bankai morphed and replaced it. As such, there is a new Bankai you can release. Since you already have the memories of your fights, you don't have to achieve it again, though you may want to test it and get used to it before you actually use it. Ichigo grinned. That means there are things that even almighty Mugetsu-sama has to discover, he commented cheekily. Mugetsu glared. Shut up, or I'll use you as a training dummy. Erlen giggled at their exchange, but continued. Also, you have regained your hollow abilities, but your hollow side has also evolved, giving you perhaps a Rancor-like abilities. I believe they call it resurrection. Mugetsu froze again. Ichigo raised an eyebrow. A Rancor? Resurrection, he repeated, not understanding the new terms, and stumbling over the pronunciation. The older Ichigo grinned. Demonio del Inferno is all hyped up. I guess in the end, I do need a training partner, he admitted excitedly. The woman smiled. Ichigo frowned. Me, Mugetsu? Or is that really you name? I don't even know what to call you, now that I know you're actually me, he complained. The older teen rubbed the back of his head and chuckled. I guess you should still call me Mugetsu. I've gotten pretty used to it, and we're not really the same anymore. And only because I'm you doesn't mean you can stop treating me like before, he mock-scolded. Ichigo rolled his eyes, but nodded nonetheless. So then, Mugetsu, why did you want to come back? What happened? He asked carefully. Mugetsu turned to look at Erlen, as if asking for approval. She nodded. You already changed the future. Telling him would not matter anymore. The transcendental being nodded in understanding and answered. Rukia ended up going to the Soul Society with the Hogyoku within her. Things went just about the same as here, up until Aizen encountered her. There, he successfully acquired the little bastard and escaped the Soul Society. He now got kidnapped, me, Ishida and Chad, and later Renji and Rukia went to save her and many fights happened. I almost died. And then I really died, and the hollow side resurrected me as a mindless hollow. Ichigo stared in shock. I know, I hated myself for a while. Well, I really turned hollow because Inao got killed. Ishida and Chad also died. I, and a few captains, got stuck in Hukomundo, and Aizen went to the Soul Society to claim the souls of the citizens of Karakura Town, which had been moved to the Soul Society to trap Aizen. Many Shinigami died, including many captains. By the time I reached the Soul Society with Rukia in tow, Yusu, Karin and Dad, and many of my classmates had already been killed. Then, I proceeded to fight Aizen and finish the war once and for all. Mugetsu paused in his explanation, as if hesitating. He killed our Rukia, and I couldn't bear it any longer, so I turned all of my wrath and my sorrow upon him, defeating him and saving the world. Then, I had nothing to go back to. And the Soul Queen appeared and sent me back. That's about all, I think. Ichigo stood and stared, unable to form any words, much less think of what to say. He knew his future self had suffered, but this was too much. He had no idea how the older teen still functioned properly. Mugetsu seemed to notice this. You don't have to be sympathetic. I've been through much, but in the end, it was you and my old friends and family who brought happiness back to me, he said, smiling and shrugging. Ichigo nodded and smiled back. Wait, then, how old are you really? He asked curiously. The older teen narrowed his eyes in thought and scratched his head. I lost count. I was way past 16 when I ran to Hukomundo, and I spent about 9 months in the Dangai, which equals about 3 real-world hours *, plus the few weeks I've spent here. I guess I'm about 17 and a bit. I should be turning 18 next summer, Mugetsu mused. Whoa, I thought you were 5 years older or something, Ichigo said, odd. Average teenagers don't look like you. Mugetsu scowled. Are you saying I look old? He threatened. Ichigo shook his head fervently, and the older teen hummed in approval. I thought so. Oh no, now that we have all that cleared up, can we go back? Ichigo asked the blonde. She nodded. Of course. Follow me. I'll open a gate directly to the living world, without dropping you in the middle of the city. They followed her silently, going over the events of that day. Ichigo took in a deep breath and scanned Karakura town from his and Mugetsu's place on a high hill. Are you going to tell them? He asked the older male. The other stayed silent for a few seconds. I'll tell Yusu, Karen and Oyaji. The others, such as our friends and the Soul Society, I will inform them later. I'm not in the mood for a full-blown interrogation, Mugetsu replied casually. Ichigo hummed and turned to look at him. Mugetsu smiled at his unasked question. I know. I have an idea. And with that, he closed his eyes and materialized Tensa Zangetsu, which now had the 4 prongs of the cross guard extended and also added a black glove on his right hand. Soon, his hair turned black again, but it did not grow back. Aw shit, he murmured. Everyone will notice how similar I am to you. Ichigo nodded in agreement, but could help the little smile that curved his lips. This way, we can really say we're brothers, he joked. Mugetsu chuckled, but agreed. They stood silent for a few more minutes, until Mugetsu broke the ice. I haven't explained to you about Hukomundo and the Arrancar, but I still have to travel over there and make sure a rebellion won't arise, so might as well bring you along. You know what they say, there's no better way of learning than through experiencing it. Ichigo raised a questioning eyebrow, but nodded. Let's go. You still have to tell Dad and the girls. Mugetsu sighed and faced the town. He smiled. This time, he was definitely there for good. Chapter 9 Recognition. Ichigo tried to suppress the shiver traveling down his spine at the sounds of giggles a pair of girls made the moment they spotted him and Mugetsu. He gave his older brother a look of disbelief when the black-haired male actually smirked and waved at them, with them waving back and giggling more. Are you for real? Ichigo asked him, eyebrow raised. Mugetsu shrugged. I'm a man, and I'm young. I have only one lifetime to enjoy. Besides, socializing doesn't mean I'm necessarily iraping them. Or are you saying you can't think of anything else when you see a girl? Or perhaps you're not a man yet, he teased mercilessly. At first, the older teen's words actually made sense, but as he continued, Ichigo blushed in both embarrassment and fury, redder and redder. I am a man, he screamed in indignation, face as red as a tomato. The pair of girls passing them started giggling harder, and he covered his face with his palm. At the glare he was sent, Mugetsu himself stopped snickering uncontrollably behind his hand, yet his eyes still held an amused glint. Then prove it. Ichigo was actually fearful to ask, knowing he might not like it, but did anyway. What am I supposed to do? Kiss a girl? And no, I'm not doing that. The last part was added when he caught Mugetsu's delighted look. He chuckled. If you say so. Well, the least you could do is get a girlfriend. Ichigo stopped in his tracks and pondered over this. Can I actually do that? For all I know, all the girls in school are avoiding me like the plague because of my scowl and reputation. Stupid, stupid Ichigo. You just had to be childish and take Mugetsu seriously. He pointedly ignored the light hum within his mind that disturbingly sounded like a laugh, coming from Zangetsu. Do you think yourself capable? Mugetsu challenged, crossing his arms. Ichigo scowled, abandoning his thoughts, and growled. Fine, but this starts tomorrow. It's already late, and you've got to explain to our family. With that, Ichigo stuck his hands in his pockets and dragged himself ahead of his friend. Mugetsu threw him one last amused glance and smiled absently. He said our family. Yoruichi Flash stepped through the relatively small Karakura town, Isshin in tow, searching up and down for Ichigo and his trouble-bringing older self. Were it not such dire circumstances, she would have said double Ichigo. At one point, they stopped on the edge of a high building, trying to think of possible places they could be in. Just as Isshin opened his mouth to say something, their eyes widened as they felt Ichigo's familiar Ryatsu. Arriving at the place they felt him, they could now make out a second spiritual pressure. At first, Isshin thought it was Mugetsu's, but then he remembered his current transcendental state and knew it was impossible to suddenly lose it. He spotted Ichigo's orange head and tall, but still young figure, and a second, taller man with short black hair with him. He turned to look at Yoruichi and saw her giving him a concerned look. He could be Mugetsu. And if he isn't? He asked. Yoruichi sighed and rubbed the bridge of her nose. At least let me go. We wouldn't want your younger son finding out what you are so early. Isshin frowned but nodded, and she disappeared. I hope you're right, he whispered. She sneaked close to her target, waiting for the best moment to strike. He turned his head the opposite side. She jumped in a flash step and raised one of her legs in a kick aimed for the side of his head. And she got her answer the moment he grabbed her leg and threw her back with such accuracy and strength that she knew had he not been so precise, she might have been in a crater in the ground. All this without turning his head to look at her. However, the moment he turned his head and she met not red, but brown sharp eyes, she got an even firmer confirmation that this was, in fact, the older Ichigo. With that, she allowed her Ryatsu to relax and hoped Isshin would get the message. Yoruichi studied the two former MIAS, taking a deep breath and preparing to launch a scolding speech. Ichigo was staring at both her and his older brother in shock and disbelief, eyes wide. Mugetsu was just standing in a relaxed, slouched position, as if already knowing he would be tested and scolded. She sighed and decided not to chew them on their absence, knowing she would be filled in together with Kisuke by Isshin. Go. I'll get back at you for making me worry later, she mock-threatened Mugetsu. He only smirked and nudged Ichigo to get going. Karen-chan, could you go buy some groceries for me? Yuzu said to her sister from the kitchen. Karen grunted in acknowledgement, grabbed the list from her sister, and moved to walk out of the house. Just as she opened the door and was about to walk out, she noticed two males in front of her. They stood in their positions for a while, Mugetsu having his arm raised to open said door, Ichigo having his mouth opened as if to tell his older brother something, and Karen having one leg in the house and one outside. Before said girl just retrieved her leg almost robotically and did something neither male would have expected, out of all possible reactions they thought of. She closed the door as if they'd never been there. After standing there, just staring blankly at the door, for a good couple minutes, Ichigo came to his senses and opened the door to their home, entering. He immediately headed for the living room, half of his mind planning to find Karen there, half thinking of their explanation and ways to do it. Fortunately, he found his little sister, the older little sister, the usually more down-to-earth one sitting on the couch, looking a little pale, though she might never admit that. Karen-chan, Yuzu could be heard coming in the living room. Are you back already? She had stopped in her tracks 4 feet away from the two of them. Mugetsu came in behind him, rubbing the back of his neck. Karen shot him a glance and closed her eyes, sighing. Man, next time you give me such a scare, I'm not letting you in again, she muttered. Yuzu just kept blinking and opening her mouth, then closing it back. You might want to sit down for this, Yuzu. Ichigo, go fetch Oyaji. He needs to be here for this, too, Mugetsu said, dragging a chair and sitting on it with his chest on its back. Ichigo raised an eyebrow at how meaningful Mugetsu's last words seemed to be, but nodded nonetheless and disappeared through a door that led to the clinic part of their home. The entire evening, Ichigo, at Mugetsu's urging, told his family about his life as a Shinigami and how he had come to meet said black-haired lifesaver. After which, Mugetsu altered Ichigo's adventure in the Soul Society with the version he had gone through and continued with the Winter War, revealing his identity to their listeners. After 2 good minutes of shocked silence, Mugetsu explained his former condition and how he had traveled back in time. So, basically, Karen began, you're telling me that you're my brother. You lived here for the past 3 weeks, almost a month, and just now you tell us you're the future version of Ikai Niai? Mugetsu winced at Karen's hurt voice, but nodded in confirmation. Can you prove it? She demanded. Mugetsu sighed. Turning my hair back to orange already made me come close to dying, so I wouldn't try it again, though I doubt I could anyway. Ichigo winced too, knowing he was the reason of that little phobia. But I do know another way to prove it to you. Karen raised an eyebrow, but understanding came to her eyes. Mugetsu smirked. When you were in 3rd grade, you came home crying to me that the boy you liked said you couldn't play football with him and his friends because you were a girl. So you literally begged me to lend you my pants and t-shirts so that you wouldn't be so feminine anymore. Karen reddened to a point he worried she would pop a blood vessel and buried her head in her lap in embarrassment. Ichigo snickered at seeing her get so embarrassed, and Isshin raised an eyebrow as he had never heard of this before. He's Ichigo, came Karen's voice muffled. Even Yuzu was giggling at her. After that, silence fell within the living room. Ichigo cringed unnoticeably at the deep silence and looked to his older self. Mugetsu had a faraway expression, looking past Isshin's head, as if he was in deep thought, but only the almost non-existent grip his hands had on his thighs proved he was deeply focused on the silence and his family's movements. Only then he realized how much this meant to Mugetsu. He had explained who he was and how he came to be to his recently proved father and sisters, who in his own timeline were dead. He was in his family's house, yet his family did not know him as good as a family would. He probably felt he was intruding and that they were not his dad and sisters too. And with shock, Ichigo came to a revelation. His older self was not afraid of bloodthirsty maniacs or war-mongering god wannabes or evil spirits. He was afraid of being rejected by his own family. Stupid Getsu, he scolded mentally. Why would they reject you? Though a small part of his mind was afraid, too, of their decision. So, he drawled, wanting to break the ice. Now what? Karen still had her head in her lap, yet he knew all her attention was on their discussion the moment he spoke. What do you mean now what? She said, raising her head. He felt Mugetsu shift next to him. He hesitated for a second. What is Mugetsu gonna do now? Karen's eyebrow rose in confusion, but soon understanding dawned on her and a thoughtful expression spread on her face. You are Kurosaki Ichigo, are you not? Isshin asked seriously, directing the question towards Mugetsu. The man in question shifted again. Kind of. Then you are my son. Time travel or not, you are born from my blood. Official documents be damned. I'm even going to adopt you if I have to, he declared, crossing his arms. That's right. Getsu Niai is still our brother, Karen said, and Yuzu approved vehemently. Ichigo let a small smile curl his lips. He knew they were going to say that. That's the kind of family the Kurosakis are, and Mugetsu should have known this by now. Said older teen was simply staring stupefied at them, mouth parted. The previous grip of his hands was no more. Then, a big grin spread across his face and his eyes shone with a light his father fondly recognized as the one he lost when his mother died. "Thank you." Sometimes, when he was still a broody 15-year-old teenager, yet unrelated with the Soul Society, and when he was still Ichigo, Mugetsu used to watch the sky late at night, when sleep wouldn't catch him. It was one of the few moments when he was alone and he felt it to the core, yet the only moment when he enjoyed loneliness. It was one of the few moments when he could think about anything and anyone. And when his eyes caught sight of the bright, bold, and majestic full moon, he found himself thinking about a certain someone. "Damn, I sound like a soap opera actor," he thought, grimacing. His hollow, for once, did not comment. Soon, his thoughts flew back to the porcelain skin, the big, elegant amethyst eyes, and the silky ebon hair of his dear Rukia. He wondered if he would ever feel her love again. Feeling melancholic? His train of thoughts interrupted. Mugetsu's brown eyes flew to the dark form of his father from his place on a chair next to the window. Once again, he had been caught exactly when he was thinking the deepest. Perhaps it was a good thing too, otherwise he might turn into a brooder. "Yeah," he answered, his attention turning back to the dark, starry sky. "Did I really do the good thing, going back in time? Do I really have a place around here?" he suddenly asked. Isshin did not look surprised in the slightest. "You did the best thing you could have done. You stopped a huge war from ever occurring, thus you protected those you love. Was that not your goal in life?" "Of course, but The older man walked closer to him and closed his eyes as a breeze of wind hit his face. "But for once in your life, you wished to go back half for yourself, for the first time having a selfish wish, right?" Mugetsu did not reply anymore, instead bowing his head in shame. "Silly child. It's not called selfishness if you want your loved ones alive and close to you. Everyone wants and needs love." Mugetsu bit his lip. "I saw you die. Right in front of me. You and Karin and you, Yusu. I couldn't go on, it was over, but I..." The teen did not continue, and the father did not push him. Instead, he took him in a hug. Mugetsu relished in the warmth and protection of his father's arms just as he would have done as a small child, and let all his walls down. And he cried hard, sobbing and hiccuping, in the embrace of his parent, for the first time in a long, long while. Ichigo watched silently from his place behind a wall. A small, soft smile stuck to his lips. To be continued. "I'll make time. Look, he's the one I told you about." "Oh my God, you're right. He's so hoot, Tilda." "Did you talk to him?" Ichigo shivered again. Mugetsu only walked on, unaffected. Suddenly, a pair of girls walked up to them, smiling brightly. "Hi, I'm Yuki, and this is Rina. What are your names?" The black-haired one spoke. Mugetsu smiled charmingly and bowed his head as a greeting. "I am Mugetsu and this is Ichigo," he answered, indicating to Ichigo. Said younger teen shot him an alarmed look. "Do you live around here?" the brown-haired girl, Rina, asked. "Yeah, actually, we live just around the corner," the older teen once again answered. Ichigo elbowed him. The two girls giggled. "Can I have your number? Please, Tilda," Yuki requested. Mugetsu chuckled. "Yeah, do you have anything to write it down on?" At this point, Ichigo could not take it any longer. "Getsu," he shouted indignantly. The girls looked at him surprised. Mugetsu only rose an eyebrow. "Oh, sorry, looks like my companion wants some attention too. Maybe he would like to meet one of you sometime soon," he said, smirking. Ichigo sputtered. No, why would I?" "Well, then, I have a conversation to carry on." And he turned back to the girls. Ichigo clenched his teeth and grabbed his arm and started trying to drag him away. "I see. I'm sorry to cut this short, girls, but Ichigo does not like to share me too much," Mugetsu said apologetically. Ichigo blushed in embarrassment and let go of him. The girls laughed. "No, we're sorry. We didn't know you were together," Rina said, giggling. No, wait. You got the wrong idea, Ichigo tried to reason. Mugetsu waved and the girls walked away. He turned to look at Ichigo, and the other was a pile of steaming flesh. What? You wanted them to go away?